Chapter 2782. Those who trespass into the Tao abyss are unforgivable. Thousands of heaven law masters released their will. His will was so strong that it even shook the terrifying dark clouds to the point of trembling without end. So you looked indifferent. You looked at them as if you were looking at a group of ants. What Tao abyss? What ancient god tribe? Let's bury them all. So you swooped down. The black light on the surface of his body rippled and turned into a pitch-black pattern. It swept around. Wherever the pattern swept past, it turned into smoke and dust. Those strong men were not spared. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the thousands of heaven law masters were killed. At this moment, they finally panicked and retreated. Quick, inform the ancient god tribe that a strong enemy is coming. He did not have the chance to finish his words. A bolt of nirvana thunder flashed in all directions. In just a few breaths, all the remaining strong men were killed. Not a single one was left. On the land of the Tao abyss, countless creatures looked up at the sky. The sky of the Tao abyss was gray. It was covered by dark clouds all year round, and no strong sunlight could be seen. However, there was no wind, frost, rain, or snow. But at this moment, their eyes widened as they saw black rain falling from the sky. It was the rain of many strong men being annihilated. Then, sirens sounded all over the land for a long time. A strong enemy has invaded. Many creatures returned to the tribe. Bell tolls and hurried shouts rang out, ordering the creatures outside to retreat back into the tribe. They stared at the sky in fear. When the black rain fell, the sky gradually darkened. Visible to the naked eye, an incomparably huge pitch-black sun slowly descended. The sun carried with it a strong sense of slaughter and destruction. Once it came, it must be the power to destroy the world. Are you a human or a demon? A desolate cry came from the vast land of the Tao abyss. The ancient mountains trembled violently. From the ground, an old man surrounded by a mysterious aura walked out. So he was no stranger to that aura. It was the aura of the wizard tribe. Luo Shui was in the belly of the Tao Tai, the saint lady of the wizard tribe. So you also guessed the identity of the old man in front of him. It should be the wizard ancestor who helped the ancient god Jiolong leave a message to the descendants. He was also the one who sealed the epic-making dragon in Tao Ye's stomach. So what if you're human? So what if you're a demon? So you calmly walked down. The black light around his body shone brightly, slowly melting the ancient land. Only the Grand Wizard was unaffected. He gazed at Suyu quietly and sighed. Humans can live, but demons must be destroyed. Suyu murmured, if I have to be bullied as a human, I would rather be a demon. He took a step forward, and the black light around him turned into ripples that pushed outwards. The Grand Wizard grunted. He involuntarily took a step back, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. An ordinary lord of the heaven law would have died long ago. He was only bleeding. His cultivation was far above that of the revived ancient god Nine Nether. Get out of my way while I still have a heart, Suyu said calmly. He was looking for ancient god Nine Dragon, and everything belonging to ancient god Nine Dragon. At the bottom of his heart, there was still a shred of rationality. He restrained himself from killing recklessly. The Grand Wizard still stood in the same place and laughed hoarsely. I'm old after all. After crossing 2 eras, my body and soul have decayed. How could he be defeated by Suyu when he was at his peak? However, he had lived from the previous era to the present. He was already rotten. He murmured, I am not here to stop you, but to save you. Rip. He tore open his ancient clothes, revealing his chest. There was an unusually striking wound there. It was like a scar of 9 dragons, shocking to the eye. At my peak, I fought with ancient god Nine Dragon, who came to the Tao abyss, and I was defeated in 1 move. The Grand Wizard said, no, not defeated, but he spared my life and made me a slave to guard this ancient land forever. So you stopped and stared at him. Where is ancient god Nine Dragon? He no longer cared about the truth of the past. He didn't care about his own life or death. He only cared about whether he could kill him or not. Ancient god Nine Dragon is in the Tao abyss, but if you go there, he can destroy you with 1 look, the Grand Wizard said bitterly. Ancient God Nine Dragon is far more powerful than you can imagine. At this time, Suyu went over. He would only be courting death, and his death would be meaningless. So what? Suyu said quietly. Immortal ancient god, my heart will always hurt. He tiptoed and bypassed the Grand Wizard. The Grand Wizard turned his back to him and sighed deeply. Human sacred body, I sympathize with your experience, but please save your strength first. Suyu didn't listen and continued forward. At this moment, a majestic voice resounded in the sky above the Tao abyss. The Grand Wizard made you a slave. Why did you betray him? As the voice fell, the Grand Wizard's face turned pale, and there was a hint of pain in his expression. Looking at his chest, the dragon-shaped scar was wriggling like a blood-sucking worm, tormenting the Grand Wizard. The dangerous dark clouds in the sky suddenly wriggled violently. Soon, it condensed into an indifferent face. That face belonged to ancient god Nine Dragon. His eyes were empty and expressionless. His eyes were empty and expressionless. It was as if he had seen through time and the creator of all things. If you were outside the Tao abyss, it might be difficult for me to find you. But since you are here, stay, the ancient god Nine Dragon said indifferently. Golden raindrops fell from the human face formed by the clouds and mist. They fell elsewhere and had no effect. But when they fell on Suyu, they melted the black light on his body. Suyu raised his head, and a bolt of pitch-black thunder burst out of his eyes. With a sizzling sound, the golden raindrops were destroyed. At the same time, he shot up into the sky and into the clouds. The indifferent face turned into a towering giant palm and pressed down. The thunderbolt of silence was destroyed on the spot. It pressed down on Suyu fiercely. Suyu's eyes were full of defiance. Instead of retreating, he soared into the sky and turned into a pitch-black sun to collide head-on with the giant palm. Bang! The giant palm shattered. The black light around Suyu dimmed a lot. In his palm was a drop of struggling blood. The face just now was formed by a drop of blood from ancient god Nine Dragon. Perhaps because it was fresh, the power it displayed was several times greater than the drop of blood from the heavenly court. You have really angered me. As if it came from the depths of the Tao abyss, a majestic and heavy voice exploded. For a moment, all the spirits of the world submitted. All the strong men of the world prostrated themselves. It was as if their king had arrived. His anger caused them to tremble in fear and unease. Suyu looked down at the ground and stomped hard with his feet. The ancient earth made a cracking sound. A corner of an incomparably deep abyss came into view. He stared into the pitch-black abyss. It was as if a pair of eyes were staring back at him from the abyss. Crash! Suddenly, there was a violent splash. A giant claw covered in dragon scales, like a thunderclap, stretched out from the abyss. It grabbed at Suyu. Chapter 2783. The black light around Suyu shone brightly. It transformed into a desolate ancient sword that was as black as ink and pierced forward. Crack! With a muffled sound, the ancient sword shattered into countless rays of black light. The giant dragon scale claw was unscathed and grabbed Suyu in its palm. From afar, it was as if a giant palm had reached out from the ground and caught the black sun in the sky. The creatures of the Tao abyss would never forget that scene. Suyu's eyes flashed with a cold light as he tried to break free from the giant dragon scale claw. However, the claw was unusually hard. The black light on the surface of his body could not be broken. However, Suyu did not retreat. Instead, he became even more frenzied. His long black flame hair not only flared up, but also grew longer. In a few breaths, it was nearly 10 feet long, even taller than Suyu himself. His face was gradually covered by the long black hair. Only a pair of cold, merciless eyes remained. Open, he spat out. The tightly clenched palm was shaken open, and large pieces of dragon scales fell off with fresh blood. A soft groan came from the dark abyss. An ant is still an ant, no matter how much it transforms. Green air suddenly erupted from the giant dragon scale claw. The airflow instantly suppressed the black light and continued to compress it. The giant dragon scale claw slowly pressed down. It was trying to crush Su Yu into pieces on the spot. Su Yu's madness did not diminish. His long black hair grew rapidly, and the flames were abnormally strong. They began to spread towards the giant dragon scale claw. However, the power of the giant dragon scale claw had already surpassed a certain limit. No matter how much Su Yu resisted, the last of his life space was slowly being compressed. And this was only the tip of the iceberg of the ancient god Jiulong's true strength. At that moment, the dark clouds in the sky suddenly shook violently. It was as if some extremely terrifying existence was forcibly passing through. The corrosive nature of the dark clouds was a taboo existence that even the demonized Su Yu did not dare to touch. However, it was being forcibly stirred at this moment. He looked up. It was a gigantic, towering figure. He stepped on the dark clouds as if they were flat ground. The corrosive dark clouds around him did not cause him any harm. Instead, they were automatically dispersed by his astonishing aura. The human ancestor? 3 mighty voices reverberated in the sky at the same time. The first was Su Yu. The second was the wizard ancestor. The last one came from the abyss. The towering figure of the human race was projected onto the vast land of the Tao abyss, causing the sky to fall into darkness. The living beings that were enveloped by it all shivered. It was as if their great emperor had returned. Dong, the Ren Zhu stepped down. Heaven and earth shook, and all living beings wept. The ground, which had been torn apart by Su Yu, was now completely torn into a gigantic fissure. It revealed an even wider abyss. Under the dim yellow light of the sacred mountain, vaguely, a huge creature could be seen emerging from the abyss. It was an incomparably terrifying existence that resembled a dragon, but wasn't. His body was covered with ancient scales. There were also countless traces of time. It was so huge that it was not inferior to the Heavenly Court's battleship. What was even more shocking was there were hundreds of dragon claws on its body. The one that had caught Su Yu was only one of them. The human ancestor had descended. Everything crawled on the ground. Even the colossal creatures in the abyss slowly sank into the water. Only a pair of ancient eyes could be seen. Unconcealable fear could be seen in his eyes. The human ancestor's eyes were hollow as he strode over with huge steps. He reached out a hand and grabbed the giant claw that had emerged from the abyss. Indifferent and dignified, he asked, "Who gave you the courage?" His hand fiercely tugged. A miserable groan could be heard from the abyss. The dragon-scaled giant claw was forcefully torn off. "Human ancestor, since you are dead, why are you not destroyed?" The colossal creature in the abyss let out an unwilling roar. In a previous era, he was an existence that could contend against the Emperor. He had clearly died, but he had lived through an entire era. Not only was his body not destroyed, but he still retained a strand of will. Relying on that strand of will, he activated the immortal body of an era and suppressed the current era. Even ancient god Jiulong, who had experienced the accumulation of an era and absorbed the remnants of the Tao abyss, cultivated to become the strongest existence of the current era. But he was still afraid of the human ancestor's body. Without saying a word, the human ancestor punched the abyss through the air. All of a sudden, giant waves rose in the abyss. One of the behemoths let out a painful scream. A stream of blood could be faintly seen gushing out, falling on the vast land of the Tao abyss. Wherever the blood passed, it immediately transformed into mountains and rivers filled with spirit energy, becoming a peerless paradise. The abyss returned to silence. The colossal creature that had emerged from the water had completely sunk. Su Yu, freed, rushed down. The human ancestor gently blocked Su Yu with his palm and shook his head. The abyss, there is no return. Even someone as strong as the human ancestor would not step into the abyss of the Tao abyss. It was as if there was a place there that even he feared. Su Yu looked back, the rationality in his eyes mostly gone. There was only a sliver of hope left. At this moment, he had been possessed to the extreme. There was no turning back. As long as the ancient god does not die, the demonic heart will not be destroyed. If it did not kill ancient god Jiulong, he would not be able to turn back. Su Yu looked deeply at the human ancestor and said, "So you will never be able to repay the kindness of the human ancestor. If there is a next life, I will definitely repay it." After saying this, he leaped into the Tao abyss. He refused to turn back. But, at this moment, a voice that made Su Yu's soul tremble hurriedly rang out. "Brother Su Yu, you don't even want me anymore?" Su Yu looked back abruptly. It was a beautiful woman dressed in a green robe, slender and elegant like a lotus. She had a sad look on her face. She was like a fairy from a painting, beautiful beyond compare. It was as if she was not a woman of this world. "Xia, Jingyu," Su Yu said hoarsely. He paused for a long time before slowly saying the name that had become somewhat unfamiliar to him. Xia Jingyu. Xia Jingyu under the pear tree. He had actually forgotten. He had actually forgotten because of Xiener's hatred. At this moment, she was still in the goddess clan, and it was unknown whether she was alive or dead. He had actually told him that he had no more worries in this world. Holding Qin Xiener's body in his arms, he looked at Xia Jingyu again. Su Yu struggled in his heart. It was as if there were two voices in his heart, both speaking to him. One of them said to avenge Xiener at all costs. The other said that he still needed to protect Xia Jingyu. Revenge would be avenged in the future. He struggled in his heart. Just as he was unable to free himself, a fragrant softness entered his arms. Xia Jingyu threw herself into his arms and kissed him gently. In an instant, Su Yu's heart was stirred. Those memories that he had deliberately forgotten were like spring water in a dry river, gushing forth once again. The little bits and pieces of the past, the silent, touching moments, the unforgettable moments. They drowned Su Yu's memories deeply. Their lips parted. The darkness in Su Yu's black pupils gradually faded. His long, burning hair, as black as ink, had turned into rotten powder. All that was left was a half-petrified, half-nine-colored Su Yu. Looking at Qin Xiener in his arms, Su Yu kissed her forehead deeply and said, "Xiener, I'm sorry. I was wrong." If only she was still conscious. Chapter 2784. She would only feel sad. This was because, even at the moment of her death, she had been begging him not to harm Su Yu. "I will definitely take revenge, but I won't sacrifice myself," Su Yu said calmly. He pressed on his heart. His wildly beating heart could finally rest and slowly calm down. The petrification and nine-colored glow also retracted. Finally, he returned to his human body. He raised his head, looked at Xia Jingyu, and said apologetically, "I've made you suffer, evil girl." Xia Jingyu's calm face suddenly burned, and the fire spread all over her body. When the flames dissipated, what remained was a woman wearing a black lotus dress and holding a sinful sword. Furthermore, she had an ice-cold expression on her face. She and Xia Jingyu had the same appearance and the same soul. It was just that their temperaments were completely different. She was a sinful woman. The sinful girl was expressionless as she said, "Consider it a return to you. No need to thank me." She was still as cold as ever. Holding her sword, she turned around and walked away. Su Yu extended his hand and tried to persuade him to stay. "Although the world is vast, do you have a place to stay? There's nothing left, right?" The sinful lady palace had long been buried in the ruins of time. The relationship between her master Yun Yazi and her was also extremely complicated. The sinful girl stopped in her tracks and said without turning her head, "Are you pitying me?" As proud as she was not willing to accept any sympathy. "No, I need you." Su Yu strode forward and patted her shoulder. "Senior sister, stay by my side." The sinful woman's body trembled slightly. His emotions were fluctuating uncontrollably. Perhaps, as a loner, no one had ever needed her, right? But what the evil girl didn't know was it was the same for Su Yu. In his previous life, he was also a loner, relying on himself for everything. But now, after such a huge setback in his life, after going through the path of becoming a demon, he was no longer a demon. His temperament gradually changed. The world was too vast. There was only one person, walking alone, and it was difficult to continue. He needed like-minded people to open up a brand new path together. "I've killed countless people and am vicious and merciless. Aren't you scared of me?" The evil girl didn't turn around. Suyu mocked himself. I've killed countless people, and I'm cruel and merciless. Are you talking about me? How many people had he killed in his life? He had even turned into a demon before this. In terms of infamy, she might not be inferior to the sinful girl. The sinful girl tightened her grip on the sinful sword. What do you need from me? After a pause, she added, if you think of me as Xia Jingyu, you can forget about it. I'm not her. I need your power, Suyu said. Use your power and mind to deal with our common enemy. The enemy of the sinful girl was Prince Xiaoyao. Suyu's enemies were all the emperors and the ancient god Jiulong. Finally, the sinful girl turned around. His indifferent eyes looked at Suyu for the first time as he said, fine, I agree. Suyu smiled. Then, he looked at Rinzhu. Rinzhu, I have many doubts and many questions that I would like to ask. The Rinzhu looked at Suyu, then slowly closed his eyes. It seemed to be in deep sleep as it stood at the edge of the abyss. It was as if he was guarding an abyss. Sacred body, Su, you don't have to ask anymore, the ancestral wizard said in a hoarse voice. The human ancestor is just a broken body. He might not know much. He lifted his eyes and looked at Suyu. If you want to know something, I might be able to answer it. Suyu's gaze was deep and profound. I want to know why there is such a huge difference in the strength of both ancient gods. Ancient God Nine Nether strength was not even 1% of ancient God Nine Dragons. And those masters, their strength should not be too far off from the ancient gods. But why was it not even 1% of ancient God Nine Dragon strength? In the beginning, ancient God Nine Dragon strength was almost the same as the other ancient gods and even the masters, the ancestral wizard said. It's just that things are different now. Suyu's eyes flashed. Why? The ancestral wizard pointed to the abyss. The reason is in that abyss. Back then, the 8 masters and the 8 great ancient gods fought for control of the current era, the ancestral wizard said like a witness. In the end, the emperors joined the side of the masters. Therefore, the 8 great ancient gods were completely defeated. Some died, some were injured, and some fled. Ancient God Nine Dragon discovered the Tao abyss by accident and entered it despite the advice of others. Suyu looked at the abyss. Even the Rinzhu said that the abyss should not be entered. The abyss is the most taboo place in the great beginning realm. Some people say that the emperor of the Holy Mountain came from the abyss. He cultivated there for an era. Not only did he lose his human form and become a giant abyss monster, but his strength also soared, the ancestral wizard said. In the great beginning realm today, probably only the emperors of the Holy Mountain can compete with ancient God Nine Dragon. Suyu's heart trembled. The emperor of the Holy Mountain came from the abyss? The Holy Mountain was a place that had existed in the great beginning realm since ancient times. It evolved into the entire great beginning realm. Later, it was occupied by a few creatures from chaos, and they began to rule for countless eras. How could Suyu not be shocked when he heard that the emperor came from the abyss? At this moment, Suyu finally understood why the 8 masters always hid in the 8-star civilization and did not dare to step out. It turned out that they were afraid of the mutated ancient god Nine Dragon. If that's the case, why does an ancient god Nine Dragon leave the abyss and crush everything? Suyu asked. The current ancient god Nine Dragon was already comparable to the stone fetus emperor. Why did he still stay in the abyss? The ancestral wizard said. Didn't the Rinzhu say just now? There is no return from the abyss. Ancient god Nine Dragon is no exception. Suyu was alerted. Ancient god Nine Dragon could not leave the Tao abyss at all. Otherwise, why would he watch Suyu overthrow the Heaven Court? All these years, he has been trying to find a way to leave the abyss. The most important thing is his successor. If his successor succeeds in gathering the 9 great domains, he could be released from the abyss. The 9th domain. It really existed. He didn't know if Yun Yazi had found it. Suyu looked at the boundless land of the Tao abyss and said, the Tao abyss, can it avoid the destruction of the Holy Mountain? It seemed that all the forces were trying to hide in the Tao abyss, to avoid the destruction of an era. No. The ancestral wizard shook his head. How terrible is the destruction of an era? How can the land of great beginnings survive? However, if we can cross the Tao abyss and cross to the nine-star civilization, we may be able to avoid the disaster. Nine-star civilization? So he was deep in thought. The existence of nine-star civilizations had always been a legend. Even the eight masters had only ruled eight-star civilizations in their lifetime. What kind of place is that? The ancestral wizard's eyes were full of yearning. A place ruled by the creatures of chaos. Only there is no destruction of an era. The core of the chaotic residents lived on the holy mountain. Most of the chaotic people lived in the nine-star civilization. They occupied the best resources of the entire great beginning realm and avoided disaster every era. They were immortal and enjoyed great fortune. It won't be easy to get there, right? So you asked. Chapter 2785. It doesn't matter how strong your cultivation is. Even if you're a ruler or an ancient god, you'll still die to the laws. There are no exceptions. Therefore, don't think about entering it for the time being. You can only rely on your own strength to force your way through, the ancestral wizard said. Suyu was puzzled. If that's the case, why is everyone fighting to enter the Tao abyss? The Grand Wizard told him everything he knew. That is because the Tao abyss cannot be destroyed. If one hides it here, the chances of it being destroyed far surpass any other place. Suyu's expression turned grave. Even the Tao abyss could not guarantee that it could avoid the destruction of an era. He pondered for a while. Suyu suddenly remembered something. With a gentle wave of his finger, a special liquid from the defensive formation outside the heavenly court appeared. May I ask where this thing exists in the Tao abyss? Suyu asked. If he could get his hands on enough special liquid, he would be able to forge an even stronger defense with the heavenly book characters that he had mastered. At the very least, it was far stronger than the heavenly court. This is a liquid that comes from the abyss. The ancestral wizard became much more solemn. I was once bestowed some by the ancient god Nine Dragons. I'll give it all to you. He gave Suyu a space storage device. Suyu opened it and thanked him gratefully. The special liquid inside exceeded his expectations, but it was more than enough. Thank you for answering my question, Grand Wizard, Suyu said gratefully. After a pause, he said, Can I help you? He was naturally referring to the release of ancient god Nine Dragons' control over the shaman ancestor. The Grand Wizard shook his head. If you really have a heart, help me take care of Luo Shui. It turned out that the wizard ancestor had long sensed the scent of his descendant on Suyu. He did not expect Suyu to release him. The ancient god Jiulong was too powerful, and it wasn't something that Suyu could dispel. Suyu nodded. All right, take care, Grand Wizard. The ancestral wizard nodded. You should also leave as soon as possible. Although the ancient god Jiulong's true body is trapped in the abyss, he has nurtured many experts of his own in this epic. I'm just one of them. Once they arrive, it will be difficult for you to leave. The so-called ancient god tribe is one of them, right? If Suyu were to go all out against one or two ancestral wizard-level strongmen, he might still be able to put up a fight. But if there were too many, that was courting death. Thank you. Suyu and the sinful girl immediately flew away. Renzu stayed at the edge of the abyss for a long time. He let out a sigh and stepped into the sky. Outside the Tao abyss, Suyu looked down at the long crack in the Tao abyss and involuntarily took out the bronze plate. Tao abyss. The soul dominator, Death Abyss, had once said that the bronze plate came from the Tao abyss. The secret was in the Tao abyss. If one day, if he could figure out the secrets of the bronze plate, he would be able to reach the sinkhole and rescue Qin Xiener, Han Xian, the little Qilin, and the others who had been lost forever. I will come back again, Suyu said coldly. Once it survived the destruction of this era, he would also return to the Tao abyss. He was determined to completely understand the secrets of the bronze plate. Just as he was about to take it back, the sinful girl at the side saw this and sighed with a complicated expression. So, the Yin Yazi even gave you the green copper plate. Back then, I couldn't get it even if I wanted it. Sinful girl knows the bronze plate. Speaking of which, The bronze plate had once been in Yun Yazi's possession. There was no reason not to recognize him. "Senior sister, do you know what the green copper plate is?" Suyu asked. Feeling confused, the sinful girl said, "I know a little." Yun Yazi said that there should be another piece of this bronze plate. The other piece? Yun Yazi had also told Suyu about this before. Could it be that the secret was the combination of two bronze plates? "I should have asked the wizard ancestor just now," Suyu said regretfully. "Forget it. When I return to the Tao Abyss, I will definitely figure it out," Suyu said seriously. The two of them rushed forward. At this moment, Suyu had already withdrawn from the state of the holy body and was led by the sinful girl. She was extremely powerful. In just half a day, they successfully returned to the distant heaven. At this time, the Battle of the Heaven had reached the final stage. A group of people led by the court master was resisting stubbornly, hoping for help from the Tao Abyss. However, the Tao Abyss had suffered heavy casualties after being killed by the demonized Suyu. At this moment, they could not even take care of themselves. How could they have the time to care about them? Seeing that their side was gradually losing, the court master could only choose to give up. "Let's go to the Tao Abyss," the court master said helplessly. If there were only a few of them, there was still hope to enter the Tao Abyss. Whoosh! Several warships rose into the sky. Carrying the court master and many descendants of the ancient gods, they all flew into the sky. Unexpectedly, just as they were about to leave, they met Suyu and the sinful girl. They were all scared out of their wits. They didn't even dare to escape. The court master's old body was trembling, but his eyes turned cunningly, and he took the initiative to surrender. "Holy body Su, the era is about to be destroyed. I am willing to help you." The era was about to be destroyed, and every bit of power was extremely precious. In particular, the court master had been in charge of the heaven for many years and had a deep understanding of it. With his help, it would undoubtedly be safer. As long as Suyu was not stupid, he should know what to do. Of course, he had to help Suyu wholeheartedly. That would be a dream. He was just stalling, trying to calm Suyu down first. When the reinforcements of the Tao Abyss came, he would immediately turn against him. No need. However, Suyu was very decisive and said without the slightest hesitation. A mass of 9-colored power shot out from his fingertips. In an instant, the old man and his companions were all burned to ashes. His eyes were calm and indifferent, without the slightest mercy. At this time, Empress Star Rain and the others who had chased after him came forward to greet him in surprise. "Suyu, you are finally back." Their faces were overflowing with joy. The death of the court master and the others. It meant that the final battle between the remnant region and the heaven had ended with their complete victory. "Suyu, we have captured a lot of captives. What should we do with them?" Empress Star Rain asked. She had already figured out how to organize the captives into a new force. Leave the ordinary captives. Kill all those related to the descendants of the ancient gods. Leave none alive, Suyu said indifferently. Although he had only been possessed for a short time, nevertheless, he was still affected. Empress Star Rain looked at the indifferent Suyu in front of her and suddenly felt a little strange. It was as if Suyu had become a different person. "Oh, okay," Empress Star Rain said. After a pause, Empress Star Rain said, "By the way, your servant Hong Yao died in the battle while trying to rescue Yu Xiongwan." "Her?" Suyu pondered for a while, and his eyes shone. "Where is her body?" "Corpse?" Empress Star Rain said. "All our corpses are placed on the mountain of the ancient god Jin Xian. Take me there." Suyu's eyes were filled with a profound look. They arrived at the mountain. It was filled with corpses. However, Hong Yao's body was not among them. "That can't be right. I placed her body here with my own hands. Why can't it be found? Did someone move it?" Empress Star Rain looked around. Suyu said indifferently, "There is no need to look. She has left." "Left?" Empress Star Rain opened her eyes wide. "But I saw her body with my own eyes. I was sure that she was really dead." Chapter 2786. Suyu did not speak and waved his hand. Under the heaven court, a ruin was separated, revealing a hidden underground hall. There was a stone box in the center of the hall, covered with a seal. At this moment, the seal was torn apart. It was still in the same state as before Su Yu and Yu Xiangwan left. There were several dried corpses of the Heaven Court members. A hideous body of the Death Master. He came to the body of the Death Master. Even after such a long time, the body of the Death Master still had a strong death domain. After a few glances, Su Yu clenched his fist. The death domain was immediately broken. The real death domain was always with the body. How could it be easily destroyed by external forces? Looking at the body, it dimmed and soon withered. The body of the Death Master had been tempered and could not be destroyed or withered. Therefore, there was no doubt. This body of the Death Master was fake, and it was disguised as the Death Master. The answer to who did it was obvious. Hong Yao was tricked by you, so you couldn't help but laugh. The Death Master he had been looking for had been by his side all along. Now that he thought about it, if this was really the Death Master, why did she kill everyone? Only Red Medicine was spared. The only answer was that she was the real Death Master, a mysterious existence who rarely showed her face, and almost no one knew her true identity. Yu Xiangwan, who knew the truth, couldn't help but open her mouth. That Hong Yao is the Death Master? Thinking of this, Yu Xiangwan's hair stood on end. This guy is too cunning. Then, in her mind, the scene of this corpse slaughtering people was also fabricated by her. Su Yu smiled. That's the only possibility. Hiss! Yu Xiangwan felt goosebumps all over her body. We traveled with the Death Master for so long. If she had any evil intentions and wanted to harm them, it would be impossible to guard against. Su Yu nodded. If he hadn't unleashed the power of the holy body, Hong Yao would have felt threatened. She would probably have continued to hide by Su Yu's side. Let me see where she is first. Su Yu closed his eyes. He had once placed a seal on Hong Yao's body that fused the 7 domains. With this seal, he could sense her location. In an instant, he sensed her presence. Dao Abyss. Su Yu opened his eyes in surprise. Hong Yao was already on her way to the Dao Abyss. Why did she go to the Dao Abyss? Su Yu was lost in thought as a person appeared in his mind. The 9th Hegemon. Could it be that Hong Yao was looking for him? Brother Su, since you can sense her, why not capture her? You're only missing the death domain from the 8 elemental domains, Yu Xiangwan suggested. Su Yu shook his head slightly and said, It's too late. She has already found a way to destroy the domain. In a faraway place, on a certain floating island, Hong Yao held a sword in her hand. That sword was stained with the blood of the Son of Heaven. It was the blood sword that the court lord had previously wielded. At this moment, Hong Yao had stabbed the sword into her abdomen. Traces of pain could be seen on his face. Suddenly, she sensed Su Yu's probing and looked behind her. A hint of nervousness appeared on his face, and he immediately sped up and twisted with all his might. The Son of Heaven's blood on the blade poured into his abdomen and quickly melted the domain restriction. A moment later, she pulled out her sword, a smile of relief on her face. Almost, Hong Yao, no, the Death Master said slowly. She dropped the blood sword and turned to face the Dao Abyss. Without hesitation, she quickly left. Su Yu sensed it and felt regretful. Forget it. I'll come back to her after the end of the era. Su Yu looked at the broken Heaven Court. Previously, he had fought with the ancient god Julong underground. Both of their combat powers were too strong. They had forcefully split the Heaven Court's battleship into 2. The rest of the domain was also riddled with holes and was in a state of desolation. It can't be used anymore. Su Yu's heart sank. The creatures of the broken domain had cut off all means of retreat and had lost their home. The Heaven Court was their only choice. However, a fierce battle had destroyed more than half of it, relying on it to survive the end of the era. It was no different from a fool's dream. Su Yu took a deep breath and activated the time and space domains. Time and space flow backward. The fusion of the 2 Yuan-level domains could naturally erupt with unprecedented power. What was visible to the naked eye was the devastation on the surface of the Heaven Court, which was rapidly flowing back to before it was destroyed. In a short span of 10 breaths, the surface of the Heaven Court was restored to its original state. However, the crack left by the battle with the ancient god Julong that ran through the Heaven Court still existed. It could not be eliminated. First, the damage was too great. Even the two yuan-level domains could not completely reverse the flow. Second, it was attached to the power of the ancient god Jiulong and the sacred mortal body. Their existence indirectly affected the healing. Su looked up at the sky. He frowned deeply. The holy mountain was approaching. They did not have time to find a second hiding place. It was a time of crisis. The sinful lady did not say a word. She bit her finger and a few drops of black blood dripped out. As it fell into the crack, countless black lotuses immediately emerged from the blood. They were densely packed and filled the entire crack. The black lotuses wantonly absorbed the remaining power of the ancient god Jiulong and the sacred mortal body in the crack. They multiplied crazily. Half an hour later, the remaining energy inside was completely sucked dry. The black lotuses thought that they had lost their source of power and began to decay. Soon, all the black lotuses decayed and turned into black dust. "Try again," the sinful lady said indifferently as she retracted her finger. Su said deeply, "Thank you." The sinful lady said expressionlessly, "Didn't I come here to help you?" Su said that he needed her. With a gentle smile, Su looked at the crack again. "It will probably take a few days. Senior sister, please help me reorganize the heavenly court," Su said. "Sure." The sinful lady bent over and landed on the ground of the heavenly court. Su began to repair the crack. As time and space flowed backward, the crack finally healed a little. The main reason was that the sinful lady removed the remaining breath inside. 10 days later, there was a rumble. The heavenly court's battleship, which had been split in half, was completely restored. It was restored to its former state. Immediately afterward, Su looked at the sky outside the heavenly court. He had obtained enough abyss water from the wizard ancestor. He only needed to integrate the heavenly book with it. However, Su did not intend to set it up immediately. His mastery of the Tome of Darkness needed to be further refined. Moreover, there were some remaining problems that might need to be dealt with. For example, the soul of the ancient god Jiuyo that had been swallowed into his stomach. He landed on the ground and used the 7 domains to set up an independent space similar to a boundary around him. Closing his eyes, he immediately looked inside his own body. As soon as he looked, Su-Yu's expression immediately became solemn. Inside his body, it was pitch black. All the flesh and blood no longer existed. Only an empty, pitch-black world was left. Chapter 2787. Is this the side effect of demonization? Su-Yu's heart was slightly heavy. His consciousness recovered, and he became a human. However, his body had already been demonized, becoming a hidden danger. Who knew if there would be a day when he would be completely demonized and lose his sense of self? This time, there was a sinful woman who pretended to be Xia Jingyu. At the final moment before he fell into the demonic path, she gave him a chance to turn back. What about next time? I'm afraid I won't have another chance, right? The Tao Tai's eye and the demonic body. Su-Yu mocked himself. The hidden dangers of my body aren't ordinary. Every single one of them was a deadly existence. Fortunately, the demonified body showed no signs of breaking out. He calmed his heart and searched for the soul of the ancient god of the Nine Nether that had been swallowed into his stomach. In a certain corner, sure enough, he saw a prison made of black flames. There was a black shadow squatting inside, trying to break out of the prison. However, it was all in vain. This was because every time he tried to attack, the black flames would burn him. It was so painful that she grimaced in pain. His body was already covered with injuries. However, the heavenly prison was as sturdy as ever. Ancient god Jiuyu, hearing about you is not as good as meeting you in person. So you walked over coldly. In truth, he once had some illusions about ancient god Nine Nether, because they had arrived at an 8-star civilization. The place he had interacted with the most was the former territory of ancient god Nine Nether. He naively tried to get close to her, but unexpectedly, Qin Xian'er didn't die at the hands of the master who Su-Yu feared the most. Instead, she died at the hands of the ancient gods who he thought were on the same side. Speaking of which, it was a great irony. When ancient god Nine Nether saw him, he immediately shrank back, his eyes filled with fear. It's you, it's you. Suyu furrowed his brows. Although he had been possessed, it did not mean that he had lost his memories. It seemed that at that time, the ancient god Juyo had looked at the black thunderbolt with a look of fear and asked, "Who is Suyu? Do you recognize me?" Suyu's eyes flickered as he probed. Ancient god Ninth Nether shrieked and prostrated himself on the ground in fear. "I was wrong. I was really wrong." Suyu was extremely curious. What kind of existence could strike such fear into the soul of an ancient god? Even if ancient God Nine Dragon's true body were here, she wouldn't be like this, right? Could it be Tianzi? That didn't seem to be the case. In the past, when ancient God Nine Nether was at his peak, he had even fought with the Son of Heaven. He shouldn't be so afraid. "Do you know who I am?" Suyu pretended to be dignified as he probed. He hoped that he could learn some secrets of the world from him. Ancient God Nine Nether prostrated on the ground, his head deeply bowed, not daring to raise it. I know. You are primal chaos." She only uttered the word chaos. Suddenly, the black space shook violently as a bolt of nirvana primordial lightning descended from nowhere. The destructive primordial thunder was extremely thick, and it was 10 times the size of the one shot out from Suyu's eyes. Boom! Ancient God Nine Nether's remnant soul was obliterated on the spot. Not even dregs were left. Suyu lifted his head to look at the source of the deadly primordial thunder. He discovered a familiar ripple, and it quickly faded away. Although it was only a fleeting moment, Suyu still managed to capture it. The Heavenly Book of Darkness. Suyu's pupils contracted. It was a secret technique from the Tome of Darkness. Moreover, it should be an extremely profound existence. However, in Suyu's memory, he had flipped through the Heavenly Book of Darkness, but he had never seen an introduction to the Nirvana primordial thunder. Could it be that the Heavenly Book of Darkness that Yun Yazi gave me is missing something? Suyu murmured. As he pondered, a burnt smell wafted over. After the ancient god Nine Nether soul was shattered, there was a small piece that was not shattered and was being burned by the black flames. It was a crystal ball the size of a wash basin. It was filled with unimaginable power. The ancient god Nine Nether's lifetime cultivation and soul essence? Suyu's eyes flickered. He sucked the giant crystal ball into his palm. Suyu was no stranger to similar essences. He had refined crystal energy balls more than once with the help of the divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron. However, they were at most the size of an egg. How could they be the size of a wash basin like the one in front of him? Moreover, the energy inside was on a completely different level from what he had refined. Is this a little compensation? Suyu's heart was unmoved. Qin Xian'er's sacrifice was exchanged for the ancient god Nine Nether's lifetime essence. For him, there was nothing to be happy about. If he could, he would rather not have it. He looked around. Seeing the Emperor's heart, Suyu moved over. The Emperor's heart was still beating. However, after being squeezed crazily last time and forcefully activating the sage body state, the surface of the Emperor's heart showed signs of drying up. A few more times, and this heart will probably be destroyed, Suyu murmured. Relying on the heart to temporarily achieve the saint body was an undesirable way of self-destruction. The saint body must be achieved by oneself. It is necessary to study the letter given by Madame Du Ming, Suyu murmured. Before Madame Du Ming died, she had given him a letter of her life's study of the saint body. He just hadn't had time to study it. Now, the end of the era was imminent. He needed to seize the time to understand some useful things. His consciousness returned to his body. Suyu activated the time incarnation and summoned the future incarnation and the past incarnation. The future incarnation comprehends the Book of Darkness. The past incarnation comprehends the saint body. I digest the essence of the ancient God Nine Nether. After saying that, Suyu also activated the time realm, speeding up the time around them to the limit. With his increasingly refined time realm, it was enough to speed up the time around them 100,000 times. There were only 3 months left before the end of the era. Under the acceleration of time, it was enough to help Suyu gain 30,000 years. Time was of the essence. Suyu began to act immediately. The two incarnations were responsible for comprehending, while he digested the essence. He placed his palm on the essence ball and began to absorb its energy. Only a little bit was absorbed. His body felt extremely inflated. The 800 Taoist marks in his body were quickly filled. His cultivation at the early stage of the Earth Master realm immediately soared, reaching the peak of the early stage of the Earth Master realm. The remaining energy was wreaking havoc in his body. So you had to stop and first eliminate the remaining energy that could not be absorbed, as well as the impurities contained in the energy. Several years passed. His cultivation was stable, and the hidden dangers were all gone. He began to absorb for the second time. This time he absorbed 2 wisps. Finally, his cultivation had a qualitative breakthrough, reaching the middle stage of the Earth Master realm. But the hidden dangers in his body were even more intense, and Suyu had to calm down and deal with them. 10 years passed. Everything calmed down, and he proceeded to the next step. Time passed slowly. The more he progressed, the more time it took. The essence of the ancient god, Nine Nether, contained many things that Suyu could not digest, and they were extremely difficult to remove. Chapter 2788. If it was an ordinary person, anyone who dared to absorb ancient god Nine Nether's power would have long since been turned into dregs by the impurities within the power. 20,000 years passed. The crystal ball the size of a wash basin was finally worn down until only a few scraps were left. With Su Yu's current cultivation, it was no longer beneficial to him. However, to countless living beings, it should be an extremely precious item. He stretched out his palm. A terrifying power that was at the peak of the Earth Lord realm, which was close to that of the Heavenly Law Lord, was slowly released. Under the expulsion of this force, the impurities were easily removed. What was left was pure energy. Not bad. After absorbing the essence of ancient god Nine Nether, his cultivation finally broke through to the peak of the Earth Lord realm. Just a little more, and he would be able to break through to the final realm. The master of the heavenly law. When he broke through to become a Tao Lord, the Tao flames of the heavens had pressed down upon him and almost buried him. That seemed to have happened yesterday. When he broke through to become a heavenly law lord in the future, he would probably have to face an even greater tribulation. After all, the master of the heavenly law was the highest level. Even someone as strong as the stone-birthed son of heaven and ancient god, 9 dragons were heavenly Tao lords. However, the masters of the heavenly law had different levels. The 8 hegemons, for example, were all at the peak of the early Tao Lord level. As for the stone-birthed son of heaven and ancient god 9 dragons, they should be in a late stage or even the peak stage. The Lord of Heaven's law was extremely powerful. Even the difference of a single realm was like the difference between heaven and earth. The difference in strength between ancient god 9 Nether and ancient god 9 Dragon was proof enough. The digestion was complete. He glanced at his 2 incarnations who were still in a state of enlightenment and took out the lotus throne of nightmares. Last time, after a long period of repair by the future incarnation, it was finally restored successfully. It had already successfully helped Insect Ancestor, Serpent Ancestor, and the other little ancestors avoid the calamity of the apocalypse. This was enough to prove its reliability. However, just in case, it was better to be cautious. After some thought, Suyu displayed the 7 great primordial realms and enhanced them with many defensive techniques from the Heavenly Book. He did his best to provide as much defense as he could. However, right at that moment, a voice suddenly rang out, causing Suyu's heart to skip a beat. Before the end of the era, that bit of defense is futile. Suyu's heart shrank. That voice with a thought. He immediately entered the spatial storage device. A colorful silkworm cocoon was glowing with a colorful light. A graceful figure was faintly discernible in the flickering light. Xiao Dai. She didn't know how long it had been since she went into seclusion to evolve. Looking at the cocoon's unprecedented changes, he said, "You've finally evolved successfully?" If he broke out of the cocoon again, he really didn't dare to imagine to what extent she would reach. Just a bit more. Carry me outside. I'll borrow your time acceleration power, Xiao Dai said. Suyu nodded and took out the cocoon. Under the acceleration of time, her cocoon changed at an even faster speed. However, the changes were not too obvious. Suyu was secretly surprised. In the past, his time acceleration wasn't effective on the cocoons and couldn't speed up the process of evolution. But at this moment, his time domain was at the yuan level, and the effect was only slightly faster. "I hope we can make it in time," Xiao Dai muttered. Suyu looked at her exquisite figure and was about to ask her about it. Xiao Dai said, "Move your eyes away. Mortal, this empress is not someone you can look directly at," Suyu smiled. He remembered the last time when Xiao Dai broke out of the cocoon and turned into a young woman. She also pretended to be cold. All right, I won't disturb your majesty." Suyu continued to fiddle with a nightmare crossing lotus. Xiao Dai said, "Didn't I say? With your weak defense, it's impossible to resist the destruction of the era." After a pause, she sighed, "Forget it, I'll do it." The giant cocoon peeled off a layer of dried-up cocoon that had lost its color. The peeled-off cocoon automatically disintegrated into strands of silk and then wrapped around the entire nightmare crossing lotus. It was like a track, constantly circling. Suyu tried to unleash the power of a peak late-stage Earthmaster. But the result was the silk, which seemed to be spinning slowly, suddenly accelerated, setting off a series of residual shadows. It quickly disintegrated the power and disappeared without a trace. Moreover, it faintly produced a faint, colorful light. The appearance of the colorful light caused Suyu's emperor's heart to tremble involuntarily. It produced a deep sense of threat. Suyu realized the power of this seemingly fragile layer of silk. Perhaps it could really produce an unexpected effect when the era was destroyed. "Mortal, don't make a fuss and disturb your empress's rest," Xiao Dai snorted lightly. There was a hint of pride in her words. Yes, your majesty, please continue." Suyu smiled. Xiao Dai was probably the only friend he had left who had accompanied him all the way until now. There was a hint of gentleness in his eyes as he shook his head with a smile and began to refine the abyss water. He wanted to dissolve the words of the heavenly book in the abyss water. The water had to be refined to remove the impurities within. Time passed in a flash. Another 10,000 years passed. Suyu held a space storage device in his hand and nodded with satisfaction. The impurities of the cold abyss water inside had been removed, replaced by the cold abyss water that was as clear as ice. After 10,000 years of refinement, its quality was so strong that it was much purer than the abyss water of the heaven. It was probably the work of the ancient god Jiolong's blood drop clone. Now, Suyu was wholeheartedly preparing for it. At the same time, the future incarnation and the past incarnation stopped their comprehension at the same time. The two fused into Suyu's body. Suyu's mind instantly obtained countless memories of the two. How majestic would 30,000 years of continuous comprehension be? Not to mention, too, even with Suyu's current soul, he couldn't help but feel a splitting headache. It took him several months to finally digest the huge amount of information. His face was a little pale, and there was a trace of pain left in it. But his eyes were full of joy. "I see." The handwritten letter recorded many of Madame Du Ming's research. In particular, the research on how to grow the holy body was quite profound. From the corpse of the holy body, she found some traces of training, and through her own research, she found a way to train. That was faith. The birth of the holy body originated from the will of the people. It was the product of the hopes of the people. If the holy body wanted to go further, it was still rooted in the people. The stronger the will of the people, the holy body could gradually be completed, and it might even reach the stage of perfect maturity. And the best way to collect the will of the people was to establish faith. "It seems to be back to square one," Suyu murmured. He was all too familiar with the path of faith. Ever since Xia Jingyu first built a statue for him to absorb the faith of the people, he had been exposed to too many paths of faith, especially the dark civilization. He had even served as the sect master. Chapter 2789. He thought of Xia Jingyu, so you could not help but be stunned. Could it be that Xia Jingyu predicted from the beginning that I would one day make a breakthrough to the first-rate saint body? Suyu muttered to himself. If I remember correctly, at that time, Suyu hadn't even activated his divine body, right? Was it a coincidence, or did Xia Jingyu really predict the future? However, if it was a coincidence, then what was the point of erecting a statue for Suyu? If he could predict the future, then his foresight was too terrifying. He could predict what would happen 100 years later. Just thinking about it was frightening. However, he finally knew how to complete the saint physique. 30,000 years of comprehension did not go to waste. In addition, the Tome of Darkness was given to his future incarnation to comprehend, and the results were remarkable. He had already grasped 10% of the Tome of Darkness. Not only had his understanding of the heavenly book reached a new level, but his understanding of the heavenly book had also reached a new level. Even his attainment in the heavenly writing secret technique had improved by leaps and bounds. Among them, there were several secret techniques that were several times more powerful than the boundless blood sea. Coupled with Su Yu's soaring cultivation, his overall strength had obviously risen to a whole new level. Even if he didn't open his sacred body, there shouldn't be many enemies in the void world. Unless it was those old monsters hidden in the Tao Abyss. Some of them might be tricky to deal with. He looked at the time. Suyu looked at Xiao Dai's cocoon again. After 10,000 years of acceleration, the figure inside was even more graceful and exquisite, exuding a mature charm. Moreover, the multicolored light on the cocoon was flickering even more. It wouldn't be long before she broke out of the cocoon. You can continue. I will go out and make some preparations. Suyu left the private training room and went outside. He wouldn't have known if he hadn't come. When he arrived, he couldn't help but jump in fright. The sacred mountain was already very close. Looking up, one could even see the veins on the sacred mountain. One could even faintly see the majestic stone embryo sun of heaven. It was as if the sacred mountain was right in front of them. Of course, Suyu understood. It only looked very close. In reality, the sacred mountain was still extremely far away. It was even further than the Tao Abyss. Even if Suyu activated his holy body, it would still take him several years to get there. However, the radiance of the sacred mountain was extremely powerful. Even from afar, he could feel the scorching heat. All the plants and trees in the heavenly court withered. Many demonic beasts and living beings were also restless. Even the living beings felt very uncomfortable. Suyu was in existence at the peak of the Earthmaster realm, yet he still felt the scorching heat. It was easy to imagine how much pain low-level creatures were in. I must quickly set up a defense, Suyu muttered to himself. Coincidentally, he had already prepared the abyss water. His attainments in the heavenly script were also far better than before. It was time to start setting up. However, with such a huge defense, it would be far from enough to rely on him alone. Senior sister, Suyu said. Shua, the sinful lady appeared out of nowhere. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and said coldly, "What is it?" Senior sister, please help me set up a defensive formation, Suyu said with a smile. He was not courteous at all. The sinful woman stared at Suyu. You really dare to order me around? In the past, the sinful woman would have probably killed Suyu without hesitation. But now indifference was indifference. But she did not refuse. If you do this, Suyu instructed with a smile. What he needed was sinful woman's power. Through her power, she covered the entire heavenly court with the water of the abyss. After sinful woman understood, she did not say a word and released all the water of the abyss in the space storage device. And with her majestic and terrible power, she mobilized all the water of the abyss. As soon as possible, sinful woman said calmly, although she did not say anything, so you could feel it. Sinful woman was very strained, but she did not say it. Suyu nodded. Immediately, he began to outline the words of the heavenly script with his fingers. His finger technique was extremely fast, and he could outline hundreds of words of the heavenly script overnight. But compared to the entire defensive formation, hundreds of words were just the tip of the iceberg. A whole day passed. The words of the heavenly script on the formation were less than 1/10 completed. Sinful woman was still expressionless, but there was a trace of fatigue in her eyes. Do you need a rest? There is not much time left, Sinful woman said. There is only 1 month left before the destruction of the holy mountain. There was no time to rest. So you could not repay her, so he could only speed up. 2 days passed. 3 days passed. 7 days passed. It was expected to take 10 days, but it was completed in 7 days. Sinful woman's face was pale, and the strength in her body was extremely weak. She was in a state of severe overdraft. Even Suyu did not feel good. His mind was numb, and his fingers were extremely painful. However, the sacrifice was not in vain. The defensive formation was finally successfully supported. Compared to the previous formation, its power was more than 2 times stronger. Firstly, it was the abyss water, which had been purified by Suyu for nearly 10,000 years. Secondly, its attainment in the heavenly script was 100 times better than the blood of ancient god Jiolong. The result was obvious. The formation created was far better than before. Boundless sea of blood. Suyu came outside the formation and displayed the secret technique of the heavenly script. A drop of blood dripped onto the formation. The previous formation was directly melted and penetrated by this drop of blood. But now, the drop of blood could not even cause a ripple. Instead, it was absorbed by the words of the heavenly script and became part of the formation. So he was very satisfied. This was the strongest backing against the light of destruction of the era. Just as Suyu was about to go back, suddenly, a huge demonic beast skeleton floated towards the heaven court. Recently, many small islands had arrived in the heaven court, asking for shelter. Hence, Suyu was not surprised by this. He did not care. This matter was handled by someone in the Cauldron, so he did not need to show up. However, a slightly familiar voice came from the skeleton of the demonic beast. Lord Su, huh? Suyu turned his head to take a look. Only then did he realize that there was a group of densely packed figures standing on the skull of the skeleton. There was a familiar person, Beast's Slave King. The person who spoke was the Beast's Slave King. The death of Wen Shui infuriated the Beast's Slave King, who swore to help Suyu destroy the Time Master. But then the situation changed too quickly. In just 10 years, not to mention the Time Master. Even the other masters died one after another. Even the entire 8-star civilization ceased to exist. The Beast's Slave King had never appeared. He did not expect to appear on a strange skeleton at this moment. As the skeleton approached, the Beast's Slave King flew over and said with emotion, "Sorry, I couldn't help you." Suyu did not care. It's okay. Suyu looked at the figures on the giant demonic beast skeleton behind him. Who are they? Those people had the same aura as the Beast Slave King. They seemed to have the same blood flowing in their veins. They're the people I found with great difficulty. Let me introduce them to you, the Beast Slave King said, before his voice died away. Chapter 2790. Ancestor? Suyu was slightly surprised. He now understood that Ancestor was a form of address for the previous era's Yuan-Tian Dao Lord. Anyone who became a Heavenly Law Lord was qualified to be called an Ancestor. There were also strong and weak Ancestors. Even early-stage Heavenly Dao Lords had several levels of power. What's more, the Master of the Heavenly Dao was at the middle, late, or even peak stage. Early-stage Ancestors could only be considered ordinary Ancestors. Only those who reached the middle stage would have the right to roam the world. For example, the 9 patriarchs who stood at the peak of the middle stage were known as the 9 great sacred patriarchs. Of course, the number 1 sacred ancestor, the human ancestor, had already surpassed the middle stage and reached the late stage. The ancestor of slaves before him was an existence that had broken through to become a Heavenly Dao Lord during the last era. The current era was also in hiding, unable to cultivate normally. His strength didn't improve much, and he remained at the early stage of the Heavenly Law Lord level. He was even weaker than the hegemons. Hence, Suyu wasn't surprised by his strength, but by his ancient identity. It really wasn't easy to survive from the last era until now. Yes, greetings, Ancestor Slave. Suyu, who considered himself a junior, greeted him politely. Who knew that Ancestor Slave really did it? I heard that you all attacked and occupied the celestial court, so I specially came to give you some pointers on your later actions. Ancestor Slave said indifferently, "The epic is about to be destroyed. There are many things that you all do not understand." So you frowned slightly. When attacking the heavenly court, he did not come out to help. When he was setting up the formation, he did not come out to help. Now that everything was ready, he came over to guide them as an elder. What guidance was there to give at this moment? However, after all, he was a great ancestor. Furthermore, he was the ancestor of the beast slave king. In addition, the heavenly court needed more help. Suyu suppressed his patience and said, "Please come in." Suyu released the defensive formation. Ancestor Slave controlled the huge demonic beast skeleton and landed in the heavens. The appearance of the demonic beast skeleton alarmed the beings of the heavenly court. That ancient ancestral level aura made them even more excited. Even the ancestors from the last era joined us. Our heavenly court is getting stronger and stronger. Hey, how powerful do you think this ancestor is? How does it compare to our sacred Su physique? Most of them did not witness the scene of Suyu obliterating ancient god Jiolong's drop of blood and charging into the Tao abyss. He didn't have a complete idea of its strength. That was why there was such a comparison. Seeing this, the living beings below were indescribably excited. The ancestor of Slave's gaze was calm. Even his clansmen looked down on him. Ancestor Nu surveyed the surroundings and discovered a rather excellent spiritual land. Coincidentally, it was an ancient god mountain. At this moment, it was occupied by a powerful force that had also sought refuge with them. This mountain will be the headquarters of our angry beast tribe in the future. All of you withdraw immediately. Ancestor Slave said indifferently. He didn't even give the other party any chance to negotiate as he slammed his palm down through the air. Instantly, all the caves on the mountain had collapsed, and the injured were innumerable. The leader of the faction was both shocked and angry. However, in front of the ancestor Slave, he did not dare to show his anger. He could only obediently move away from the mountain. Just like that, the beast slave clan successfully occupied this mountain. When Suyu saw this, his brows furrowed even deeper. The beast slave monarch wore a helpless and apologetic expression as he said, "Lord Su, the ancestor is used to being arrogant, but his strength will definitely be of great help to you in resisting the destruction of the previous era. After all, the ancestor is one of the few who survived the previous era, so he must have something special about him." Ever since the beast slave king left the 8-star civilization. Thus, he went to search for his own race, hoping to borrow their power to destroy the Time Dominator. However, the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. However, if the ancestor could help Su Yu in resisting the destruction of the previous era, he would fulfill his promise. Used to being arrogant? Su Yu glanced at the giant skeleton indifferently and said, "Try to restrain your people. If they cause any trouble, don't blame me for not giving you face." To be honest, if it wasn't for Wen Shui, what was the beast slave monarch? Not only did they not have any friendship before, but they also had a grudge against each other. Yes, I understand. The beast slave monarch did not dare to disobey. After a pause, the beast slave monarch said thoughtfully, "However, Lord Su, we found some dangers on our way here. I hope you can pay attention to them." "What dangers?" The beast slave monarch said, "We found many islands were destroyed along the way." "Oh, how?" Suyu asked. He was not too surprised. The closer the era was to destruction, the more chaotic it would be. It was normal for evil forces to take advantage of the opportunity to create chaos. The creatures on those islands were all eaten by some evil existence. Not a single one was left. The beast slave monarch looked a little scared. Suyu's eyes flickered slightly. "Eaten? How can you be sure that they were eaten and not captured?" The beast slave monarch said, "The ancestor said so." He said the aura of the ancient top-level ferocious beasts appeared on those islands. Those who went missing should have been eaten. Hearing this, Suyu's pupils constricted slightly. 9 top-level ferocious beasts? Why does it sound so familiar? If I remember correctly, What Gu Taishu cultivated was the 9 spirits magic art. The 9 spirits were 9 ancient, ferocious beasts. However, Gu Taishu was quite weak at that time. He should not have been able to destroy the many forces on the islands. Did your ancestor say how strong the 9 ferocious beasts were? The beast's slave monarch's expression became more and more serious. He said hesitantly, "To be honest, the ancestor decided to come to the Heaven Court because he found out about this." In other words, the beast's slave monarch was scared. He did not intend to come to the Heaven Court at first, but after seeing the 9 ferocious beasts teasing him, he had no choice but to come to the Heaven Court to seek refuge. Su Yu's eyes deepened. It had been many years. Had Gu Taishu become so powerful that even the ancient ancestors were afraid of him? Su Yu's eyes narrowed. How far is the nearest destroyed island from here? 10 days' journey. Only 10 days? Moreover, it had been 10 days since they arrived here, right? If Gu Taishu had really devoured all the way here, it was almost time for him to arrive. Well, thank you for the reminder. You can go and rest now, Su Yu said. The beast's slave monarch nodded. Be careful. Then he returned to his people. Su Yu looked at the sinful lady who was sitting cross-legged and resting. He said, "You help me look after the Heaven Court. I want to go out and have a look." The sinful lady opened her eyes. You'd better be careful. The 9 ferocious beasts, if you mean the 9 beasts when the world was created, are quite dangerous. If you are careless, you may not be able to come back. Even the sinful lady was warning him so seriously. She knew Su Yu's real strength. Hearing this, Su Yu's expression became more serious. Then I have to go and check out the surroundings. If such a dangerous existence was lurking around the Heaven Court, it would be very troublesome. When the arrow was destroyed, it would suddenly appear and cause trouble. At that time, it would be very troublesome. He leaped out of the formation and stood in the void. His eyes looked around. Under the dim light, everything could be seen clearly. Chapter 2791. But within his field of vision, there was nothing unusual. With a thought, Su Yu opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Every drop of blood transformed into a Su Yu. In an instant, there were thousands of Su Yu in the same place. This could be considered as a drop of blood transformation. However, the Su Yu that was transformed was very weak and could not be compared with the incarnation of time. Go! Under the command of the original body, thousands of Su Yu looked in different directions. They searched for anything that could hide their tracks nearby. Meteorites, islands, drifting remains, etc. If they could be found, they would not let go. 2 hours passed. There was no feedback. The only feedback was that it was very quiet. But this silence, in Su Yu's view, was deeply wrong. As usual, there should be at least 1 or 2 forces nearby, joining the heavenly court to take refuge. Now, he had not encountered one in 2 hours, which was a bit abnormal. 2 hours passed. 6 hours passed. A whole day passed. In the end, no one showed up. Su Yu's eyes were solemn. It seems that he is really nearby, Su Yu murmured. If it wasn't for the arrival of the ancestor of slaves, I would have almost ignored him. Keep looking. Su Yu ordered the incarnation. He had to find the other party, even if he had to dig 3 feet into the ground. Such a large-scale search. Finally, there was something. At this time, Su Yu suddenly felt a slight tingling in his body, as if a needle had pricked his skin. That was because a clone had been destroyed. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat, and he stepped forward. With his current body technique, it would only take half an hour to get there. When he arrived, on a careful island, he saw a drop of blood left in the original place. There was a particularly fierce and barbaric aura nearby. Perhaps it was the aura of the 9 great ferocious beasts that the ancestor of slaves had mentioned. His eyes narrowed slightly. Has escaped? At this moment, there was another tingling on his skin. Another clone of Su Yu was destroyed. His eyes flashed, and he immediately chased after it. However, he was a little late. There was only a trace of blood in the original place. Then there was another tingling, followed by a second, a third. His doppelgangers were being destroyed at a rapid pace. Su Yu was not angry, but happy. Surround the vicinity, Su Yu ordered. All of the doppelgangers gathered in the vicinity, striving to surround Gu Taishu in the center. He didn't hope that they would be able to capture the other party. He only hoped that they could reveal his exact location. The tens of thousands of clones immediately converged at the same spot. Soon, he felt a piercing pain. Along the way, the stinging pain kept coming. His escape route was clearly visible. Let's see where you can escape to. So he took quick steps forward. Have a cup of tea later. Finally, he caught up to his thousands of clones. They were chasing and intercepting a blood shadow. The latter was extremely ferocious, and the strong energy it carried when it walked could instantly kill one of Su Yu's incarnations. The doppelganger disappeared at an extremely fast speed. Shua, Su Yu's body flickered, and he appeared in front of the other party. He immediately came to a halt. The two of them looked at each other. Su Yu was slightly surprised, as this wasn't the Gu Taishu that he had imagined. Instead, he was just a young martial artist who also cultivated some kind of blood technique. His cultivation was not weak. He had reached the middle stage of the Tao Lord realm. Could it be that this person had devoured all the forces in the vicinity? However, Su Yu quickly realized that something was amiss. His eyes narrowed. Is Gu Taishu to you? If the culprit was really just the young man in front of him, why should the dignified ancestor of slaves be afraid? Although Su Yu did not think that the ancestor of slaves was very powerful, that was only relative to himself. Compared to the young man in front of him, the ancestor of slaves could crush him with one finger. He should not be afraid. The answer was obvious. This fake culprit, who was fleeing in all directions, was attracting Su Yu's attention and buying time for the real culprit. The young man pretended to be flustered. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Su Yu said indifferently. You don't understand? He took a step forward, and a Yuan-level space domain was automatically released, forming a net cover and suddenly trapping the young man in it. The young man's face changed slightly, and he immediately sacrificed several very ferocious beast souls from his body, tearing at the blockade of the space domain. Su Yu looked at it and said indifferently, still denying it? Although he had not seen Gu Taishu display the so-called body of 9 spirits. But at least he had heard that people with the body of 9 spirits were surrounded by the souls of ferocious beasts. This person had a certain relationship with Gu Taishu. At this moment, the young man finally admitted it, but he was not afraid. Instead, he revealed a somewhat hideous smile. Master has always said that the holy physique Su is cunning, but now it seems that it is just a mere trick of luring the tiger away from the mountain has lured you away. Su Yu's face changed slightly. Luring the tiger away from the mountain? Then, the real Gu Taishu is now. You finally understand? The young man said, Master has reached your heaven, and now, maybe he has eaten everyone. It is ridiculous that you are still chasing me all over the world. Stupid as a pig. However, Su Yu was not worried at all. Instead, the corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. Are you not afraid of death? It should be known that no matter how much his master swallowed, it had nothing to do with him. The young man crossed his arms in front of his chest confidently and said arrogantly, You dare to kill me? Master has probably captured your wife, Qin Xiener, alive by now. If you touch a single hair of mine, I can't guarantee how Master will treat your wife. Su Yu's eyes were calm. He sighed softly. Let me correct you on 2 points. First, my wife is already dead. If Gu Taishu can go to the ultimate ruins and bring her back, I will thank him. Hearing this, the young man's face stiffened. They were far away from the heaven all year round, and the news was extremely isolated. They had no idea what had happened between the heaven and the remnant regions. Don't be too proud. My master may have captured other important people. The young man shivered, finding that things were a little beyond his expectations. Su Yu continued, I correct you on the second point. Your master can't capture anyone. The young man was particularly confident about this point. He said proudly, Master's current cultivation and strength are beyond your imagination. Capturing people of the heaven is as easy as taking something out of his pocket. You don't have to worry about this at all. He laughed and laughed, but soon he could not laugh anymore, because in front of him, a piece of Su Yu's face suddenly peeled off. It revealed a hollow inside. You The young man said in surprise. Suyu touched his cheek and smiled faintly. Is the time almost up? Then, let me send you on your way. Without a doubt, this Suyu is merely an illusion created by Suyu's main body with a single thought. He had been fighting with Gu Taishu for many years. How could he not understand Gu Taishu's cunning? Therefore, from the beginning, he had expected that this was most likely a trick, using a fake Gu Taishu to lure his real body away from the heaven. Chapter 2792. No, impossible. How could you possibly know? The young man couldn't believe it. Suyu chuckled softly. It seems like your master doesn't really understand me. He clenched his fist. The space domain began to compress rapidly. The young man's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly begged for mercy. Holy Physique Su, please spare my life. This is my master's decision. I'm just following orders. Suyu replied calmly. Following orders? Why do I feel like you're enjoying it? As he spoke, he continued to compress it. The young man was so scared that his face turned pale. He hurriedly said, I'm still useful. You can use me to threaten master. Suyu shook his head. You don't understand Gu Taishu. With his personality, he wouldn't harm himself for anyone. You are of no value to him. His 5 fingers instantly clenched. The young man was crushed into pieces on the spot. At that moment, Suyu's whole body started to peel off. He looked in the direction of the heavenly court and chuckled. It's all up to you now. Heavenly court. Half a day ago, the sinful girl was recuperating at the same place. His severely overdrawn strength was finally alleviated a little, but it was still not enough. It could only support him for a while. His overall strength was also greatly reduced due to the severe overdraft of his strength. If an existence similar to the incarnation of ancient God Nine Dragon were to appear, there was a high probability that they would not be able to defeat it. While she was recuperating, her brows suddenly twitched. He slowly opened his eyes and shouted, Come out, there's no need to hide. As soon as he finished speaking, a green-robed man wearing a conical bamboo had appeared outside the defensive formation. He stood with his hands behind his back, looking down at all the living beings in the heavenly court. Occasionally, his eyes revealed a deep desire and greed. When he finally looked at the sinful girl, he smiled faintly. Xia Jingyu. Huh? I didn't expect that you would still follow Suyu after so many years. You're really loyal. The sinful lady's heart stirred. However, he did not deny it. Who are you? The sinful woman asked calmly. With the existence of a defensive formation, it wouldn't be easy for that person to cross over. The bamboo hat man chuckled and took off his bamboo hat, revealing an exceptionally old and savage face. He looked to be in his 60s or 70s. His temples were white and his hair was gray. The skin on his face wrinkled. Moreover, for some reason, there were 2 black horns growing out of his forehead. Finally, there were fangs similar to those of a demonic beast. Now, he had become an existence that was neither human nor demon. You can call me Gu Taishu, or you can call me an old friend. He really was Gu Taishu. Ever since he left the 7-star civilization, he had been wandering in the void. From weak to strong, it continuously devoured all kinds of living beings. After decades of bloody cultivation, not only did he recover the vile souls that little butterfly had devoured, but he also cultivated the rest of the vile souls to great success. He had finally reached the level of mastery of the 9 vicious beasts. His strength soared to the sky. He became a taboo existence in the world of nothingness. Apart from that, he had also nurtured a few younger disciples, all of whom had some achievements. He knew that the heavenly court had changed owners. Moreover, when it was his old rival, Suyu, he immediately rushed over. The first reason was because after cultivating for so long, he already reached a bottleneck. If he wanted to advance a step further, devouring ordinary creatures wouldn't yield much results. Only an ancient god, a ruler, or an ancestor would be able to force it to continue forward. The heavenly court was protected by the Tao Abyss, so Gu Taishu didn't dare to have any ideas. Now, with only Suyu, who had no background, what did he have to fear? The second reason was that by choosing Suyu's power, he had more or less avenged some of the past. Oh, the sinful lady closed her eyes again expressionless, and continued to recover her strength. Gu Taishu had thought that Xia Jingyu would be surprised, panicked, or afraid. However, he never expected that she would have such an indifferent attitude. This made Gu Taishu's words stuck in his chest, and he had nowhere to vent them. "Aren't you surprised?" Gu Taishu asked. The sinful lady looked at him, expressionless, and said in a flat tone, "Oh, it's you. I'm very surprised." This kind of declarative tone caused Gu Taishu to be speechless. Had this Xia Jingyu always been so indifferent? It didn't seem like it, did it? It seemed that she had been stimulated to become like this. However, it didn't matter. He would enter the heavenly court first. He looked at the defensive formation in front of him and said, "It's just a small formation. It can't stop me." In the past, he had studied the defensive formation of the heavenly court more than once. Although the formation of the characters of the heavenly book was powerful, he thought that it wouldn't be difficult to break it with his ability. Break it? Gu Taishu smiled confidently as he stared at the sinful girl. He struck the formation with his palm and said, "Xia Jingyu, back then, your Suyu stole my fiancée. Now, I'm going to steal you away. Consider it an eye for an eye." The word "I" was still in his mouth. Gu Taishu's body movement technique was suddenly shaken back. The power in his palm swept back at him without missing a single bit, shaking him away. If it weren't for his powerful cultivation now, he would have been injured. He stared at the formation in disbelief. It shouldn't be. He had analyzed it several times before, and there shouldn't be any suspense in breaking it. "I was careless just now. Let's do it again." Gu Taishu was a little embarrassed. The sinful lady said calmly, "Okay, come on, try to catch me." Gu Taishu's face was livid. "It seems that you still don't understand my current transformation. 9 ferocious transformations." Gu Taishu shouted. A mist of blood flashed around him, and a ferocious spirit roared. Gu Taishu's body turned into a half-ferocious beast. His palm turned into a ferocious beast's claw, and he tore the formation fiercely. "Break!" he shouted. However, the formation was as stable as before, and only some ripples were set off. Gu Taishu took a few steps back in surprise, and he couldn't believe it. Again, 9 ferocious transformations. Another powerful beast's soul appeared. However, after a blow, the formation was as safe as before, and there was no change at all. One more time, 9 ferocious transformations. Again, until the 9 ferocious 9 transformations, all the beast souls were used. Gu Taishu still couldn't break the formation. This is not the original formation. Gu Taishu finally realized. The sinful lady said calmly, "Yes, it was changed a long time ago. Didn't anyone tell you?" Gu Taishu's face turned green. He had come from thousands of miles away, ready to kill and capture Su Yu's important family. In the end, he couldn't even break the formation. At this time, many people had already gathered in the heaven court to watch the show. They watched Gu Taishu break the formation silently. "Hey, where did this idiot come from? He wants to break the defense formation set up by our holy body, Su himself. Maybe there's something wrong with his brain? Don't say that. His performance is quite wonderful. Ferocious beasts are so noisy." They heard the mocking of the many creatures inside. Gu Taishu's face was livid. He gritted his teeth and said angrily, "What are you so proud of? That was just a warm-up." His momentum changed abruptly, and the 9 great beast souls all retracted into his body. The sinful lady opened her eyes suddenly, and her expression became serious. Chapter 2793. He subconsciously tightened his grip on the sinful sword. His nerves were stretched taut, as if he was facing a great threat. She was a sinful woman. Even if he only had half of his strength, he still couldn't be underestimated. However, his expression was extremely solemn. After the 9 ferocious beasts returned to his body, Gu Taishu began to speak ancient words. His voice was deep and distant. It gave people a strange sense of oppression. Normal living beings were fine, but those with monster beast bloodlines felt even more pain. On a mountain of the heavenly court, The ancestor of Slave and his many clansmen sensed Gu Taishu's arrival. They curled up in the remains of the demonic beasts. Ancestor Slave used an ancient secret technique to activate the defense of the demonic beast remains. A layer of defense that was similar to an airflow sealed the entire remains within. This way, it could be isolated from the outside world. Apart from attacks that were stronger than Ancestor Slave's, nothing else could penetrate his defense. However, that deep and boundless voice, it was able to penetrate the airflow defense without any hindrance and affect their bodies. All of them, including Ancestor Slave, were in unbearable pain. Upon closer inspection, one could see that tiny flames were leaping out of their pores. That was because their demonic beast bloodlines were all burning. For a time, screams filled the air. An expert like Ancestor Slave could still remain calm, but many of the weaker ones were burnt to a crisp on the spot. And this was merely a spell that Gu Taishu had recited. He had yet to unleash his true strength. Although the sinful woman did not have the bloodline of a demonic beast, her voice was extremely ear-piercing and made people feel extremely uncomfortable. His body was burning hot, and his insides were hurting. She stared at Gu Taishu and witnessed it with her own eyes. Gu Taishu chanted an ancient incantation as he stabbed his palm into his chest. Then, he slowly drew out a weapon that looked like a sword. It was a sword forged from the bones of vicious beasts. There were 9 ferocious heads on it. They were the heads of the 9 murderers. They shrieked and roared fiercely. The moment this sword appeared, the sinful girl felt threatened. She muttered, "This sword actually exists." It was said that the 9 great ferocious beasts that appeared during the creation of the world were all killed by an emperor. Then, he used their bones and skulls to forge a ferocious sword. It was called the 9 Ferocious Origin Sword. This sword would only circulate in the blood of those who cultivated the secret art of 9 evils. Only those who had achieved great success could obtain it. Gu Taishu had really cultivated this technique to the extreme. As a result, he was able to obtain the 9 Ominous Origin sword personally forged by the emperor. Tick-tock. In the end, Gu Taishu finally pulled out the sword, which was stained with traces of bright red blood. You can actually recognize this sword. Xia Jingyu, your knowledge is truly admirable. The agony on Gu Taishu's face slowly dissipated and was replaced by a faint, hideous grin. The sinful girl tightly gripped the sinful sword, not saying a word. She stood up slowly and looked at Gu Taishu from afar. When the latter saw her serious expression, he felt proud of himself. Xia Jingyu, so you will die by my 9 vicious origin swords sooner or later. Why don't you follow me now? If I'm in a good mood, I might even give you some pointers in cultivating the secret art of 9 evils, giving you a chance to obtain the origin sort of 9 evils. The sinful lady was expressionless. She only spat out one word, scram. Upon hearing this, Gu Taishu's face stiffened slightly. However, he regained his playful expression. Then, I'd better use force. After I capture you, I'll have plenty of ways to slowly taste you. He held the 9 Ferocious Origin sword in his hand. Gu Taishu came before the formation again and pierced it with his sword. However, Gu Taishu's face stiffened completely. The sword did not pierce into the formation at all. How is this possible? Gu Taishu was really shocked. The 9 Vicious Origin sword was forged by the emperor. How tough and terrifying was it? What could it not be cut into? Now, even the formation could not be pierced. Who set up this formation? Gu Taishu's face was extremely unsightly. He had exerted all his strength, but he could not even enter it. The power of the formation was beyond his imagination. Of course it was set up by me. A faint, humorous teasing voice rang out from behind Gu Taishu. Gu Taishu's heart skipped a beat, and he turned around abruptly. What came into view was a handsome young man with long silver-white hair. He was dressed in an elegant moonlight robe. "Su, you." Gu Taishu clenched his teeth and said subconsciously. He would never forget this face, not even in his dreams. Suyu was the archenemy that he had been chasing and trying to surpass for his entire life. However, shouldn't Suyu have been deceived by his own disciple? Why did he come back? Or had his plan been seen through by Su Yu? You're old, Su Yu said lightly as he looked at Gu Taishu, who looked old. Gu Taishu used to be young and handsome. After a few decades, he had aged so much. It must have something to do with his cultivation technique. After devouring others all day, it was inevitable that he would absorb a lot of impurities. He might be able to remove some of them in a short time, but over the years, they would accumulate and cause serious damage to his body. Gu Taishu suddenly felt an inexplicable hatred. Looking at Su Yu's almost unchanged face, he said in a low voice, "You're still the same. You haven't changed at all." Su Yu just smiled softly. The only thing that hadn't changed was his appearance. Internally, he had been reborn. Su Yu looked at the sword in his hand and stood calmly with his arms crossed. He said, "Do you want me to give you some time to slowly break the formation? If you can break it, it's my loss." The abyss water of the formation was something that he had been refining for 10,000 years. He had reached the pinnacle of the heavenly book writing. It was an existence that could resist the destruction of an era. If it was easily broken by Gu Taishu, then all his hard work over the years would be in vain. Gu Taishu felt deeply humiliated. Why was he still inferior to Su Yu when he was so powerful? "Su Yu, do you think you're so powerful?" Gu Taishu raised his head and said coldly. Su Yu put down his arms, and the oil lamp slowly appeared on top of his head. He said lightly, "I'm more powerful than you." As soon as he said that, it was like a needle piercing Gu Taishu's heart. If he was powerful enough, his fiancée, Lu Chuyi, would not have become Su Yu's woman and become a shame that could never be washed away. Gu Taishu's eyes were red. His whole body was filled with ferocity. "Su Yu, don't be so arrogant. For more than 100 years, you're not the only one who has had opportunities and made progress. The world doesn't revolve around you. I'm not the Gu Taishu of the past, and you're not the invincible Su Yu of the past." Su Yu looked at him calmly and said indifferently, "If that's the case, why did you have to lure me away?" Upon hearing that, Gu Taishu's expression froze. "Since you're here, let's have a serious fight. I'll fulfill your wish." Su Yu's eyes turned cold. He took a look at the formation. Although it couldn't be seen with the naked eye, he had crafted the formation himself. How could he not see it? There was a fine crack where Gu Taishu had just pierced. Chapter 2794. Fortunately, he was alert. He used one thought to become real to deceive Gu Taishu, who was hiding in the dark. The real body was hiding nearby. Otherwise, Gu Taishu might really get what he wanted, not to mention destroying many creatures in the heavenly court. He might even abduct the sinful lady when she was weak. This kind of poisonous snake hiding in the dark was impossible to guard against. "I'm not afraid of you." Gu Taishu held the 9 ferocious origin sword in his hand and stabbed forward. "Holy body," Su Yu said softly. The oil lamp above his head released a great deal of 9-colored light, which wrapped him up. Su Yu stretched out his palm and waved it at Gu Taishu. A rainbow-colored palm print flew out. "Break!" Gu Taishu held the sword and stabbed. The palm print, condensed by the power of the holy body, was cut open like a piece of paper. Gu Taishu was surprised and confident. He couldn't help but sneer. The holy body is nothing more than this. He had always been afraid of Su Yu's human holy body. He didn't expect Su Yu's holy body to be so weak. His confidence soared. "Eat my sword." Swish! Cold light flickered in the sword and turned into a sword light, aiming at Su Yu's brow. Su Yu's face was indifferent. His heart beat faster, which increased the power of his holy body. The sword light attacked, and Su Yu clenched his palm. The power of 9-colored light wrapped around it. The sword light lasted for a long time before it finally disappeared. However, the power of 9-colored light in Su Yu's palm had been completely destroyed, and it hurt his palm, leaving a scar. Seeing this, Gu Taishu couldn't help but laugh. "The human holy body is nothing more than this. I was afraid of you for so many years. It turns out that you are only at this level." Gu Taishu looked up and laughed. He never thought Su Yu, who he thought he couldn't surpass, was so weak. He could hurt him with a random sword. Recalling his fear of Su Yu in the past, He couldn't help but laugh at himself. I'm too inferior to be afraid of people like you for so long, However, from today on, everything will change. The long sword in his hand formed an extremely cold arc. Surnamed Sue, you can go in peace. I will eat your man and enjoy your woman for you. You don't have to worry anymore. Extermination of the 9 evils, / Gu Taishu activated the 9 evils origin sword to the extreme. The heads of the 9 fierce beasts howled and turned into jagged sword shadows. It came crashing down. Suyu's expression was calm. Is this your strongest attack? Not bad. The power of this attack was truly extraordinary. It had already surpassed a single drop of ancient god 9 Dragon's blood. No wonder the sinful woman reminded him that if he was careless, he might not be able to return. However, if he wasn't careless, it wouldn't be a problem. Bang bang. Suyu's heart beat faster. This allowed his saint body to quickly reach the great accomplishment level, although it could only last for a moment, but also enough. The light on his body transformed into an incomparably dazzling rainbow, as if it had materialized. In the blink of an eye, the entire world was covered in colorful lights. At this moment, the sword's shadow flashed. Suyu casually raised his palm and clenched it lightly. Gu Taishu grinned hideously. You're courting death. Suyu couldn't even withstand an ordinary sword, let alone his most powerful one. Suyu would definitely be cleaved in half by the sword. However, the scene he imagined didn't happen. Instead, the sword shadow was easily caught by Suyu's palm. Then, he squeezed it forcefully, and the sword shadow was completely shattered. Gu Taishu's eyes were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? How could Suyu not be injured at all, and even destroy it? Again, another extremely powerful sword shadow appeared, but it was still destroyed by Suyu effortlessly. There was no room for negotiation. Gu Taishu's eyes widened in disbelief. Suyu's expression was calm. Perhaps you should continue to feel inferior. As he spoke, Suyu took a step forward. The boundless materialized energy crashed into Gu Taishu like a tidal wave, causing him to retreat continuously. Gu Taishu was horrified. In the face of such power, he felt as insignificant as an ant, unable to resist at all. Was this Suyu's real strength? No matter how hard he tried, he would always be defeated by Suyu. He couldn't even withstand a single blow. He was extremely indignant. Gu Taishu climbed to his feet and fled in panic. Suyu caught up with him and said indifferently, Actually, you can come and go as you please in the heavenly court, right? Imprisonment. The materialized 9-colored energy suddenly rolled back, forming a cage that enveloped heaven and earth, and kept shrinking, slowly trapping Gu Taishu within it. Gu Taishu's face changed dramatically. Once trapped, he would never be able to leave for the rest of his life. At the critical moment, he bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood mist, which fell on the 9 ominous origin sword. This sword became more ferocious upon contact with blood. The 9 ferocious beast heads on it were extremely excited after tasting the blood mist. Gu Taishu took the opportunity to clench the long sword tightly and slash to the 9-colored energy that was rolling towards him. A soft sound was heard, and a crack was actually cut open. Gu Taishu was overjoyed and immediately got out of it, fleeing quickly. Suyu's eyes were indifferent as he followed slowly. Gu Taishu turned to look at Suyu and snorted coldly. Su, this isn't over yet. He stepped on the 9 ominous origin sword. The sword flew at high speed. Its speed was slightly faster than that of Suyu, who had a first-rate holy physique. Gu Taishu couldn't defeat it, but it was easy for him to escape. Of course, that was just what he thought. He ran for 2 days and 2 nights. Gu Taishu found that he had lost track of Suyu's aura, and he could finally heave a sigh of relief. Looking at the wounds all over his body, and then at himself, Gu Taishu said with hatred, Damn it, after so many years of hard work, I still can't defeat Suyu. He was even a little disheartened. It seemed that no matter what, he couldn't escape from Suyu. Right at that moment, a crisp beeping sound came from his waist. It was his messaging jade. He opened it and saw a message. Master, When will you return? It was from his disciples. For many years, Gu Taishu had been looking for people with the same constitution as him. His goal was to cultivate more strong men, to gather them into a force. Now it was finally working. He found a total of 20 disciples, all of whom were cultivating the 9-spirit body. Among them, there were 2 disciples whose talents were even above his master's. Their cultivation speed was amazing. If they could survive the destruction of the era and reach the next era, he would definitely be able to become a peerless existence that could stand on his own. Thinking of this, Gu Taishu's dejection faded. Suyu, even if I can't defeat you, I still have disciples and grand disciples who will avenge me for generations. One day, one of them will surpass me. His 9 ominous origin technique hadn't reached the highest level. There was still room for improvement. But all the opportunities he had were not enough for him to cultivate to the highest level. Only those with extraordinary talents could do it. Chapter 2795. After looking left and right, Gu Taishu stepped on the void and came to an extremely secretive group of islands after making a few turns and twists. This place was lifeless, with a large number of uninhabited islands floating in the air. On an island in the middle, there were only a few figures moving about. They sensed Gu Taishu's return and came forward to pay their respects. "Welcome back, Master." The people in front of them were the disciples cultivated by Gu Taishu. The 2 people in front were a man and a woman. They were Gu Taishu's proudest disciples. They were extremely talented. After only 10 years of cultivation, they were no less than his 100 years of cultivation. If they were given a few more decades, they could reach the level of the 9 vicious beasts. They might even surpass him in the future. Gu Taishu's face showed a gentle expression. "Get up, all of you. Master, did you devour all the creatures in the heavenly court? Did you leave some for us disciples?" The woman in front said, gritting her teeth. Her mouth was full of blood. She, who devoured creatures all year round, was obviously a human. But now, her face was full of scales, and her smile was extremely ferocious. Looking at the others, they were all the same. They had become half-beasts long ago. Over the years, they had killed innocents and devoured creatures as their goal. It could be said that they were the evilest existence in this void. Gu Taishu sighed and said, "Master met his old nemesis. After a battle and injuring him, he let him and his people go." "What?" The disciples were confused. "Master, that enemy took your fiancée and caused you to lose everything. How could you let him go so easily?" Gu Taishu said shamelessly, "It's easy for me to kill him, but it's too easy for him to die like this. I hope that I can train you so that one day you can kill my enemy for me." The scaled woman who spoke said coldly, "Don't worry, I will train hard. If I meet him in the future, I will eat him bit by bit and let him repent in pain." The other disciples showed their teeth. It was extremely gloomy, but right at this moment, the skies suddenly turned into 9 colors. They, who were hiding in the dark, closed their eyes. Gu Taishu's body stiffened, and he looked behind him in disbelief. His lips trembled as he said, Suyu? Didn't I get rid of him? How'd he catch up?" Suddenly, Gu Taishu suddenly realized something and looked at his 9 ominous origin sword. There was a trace of 9-colored energy hidden in the sword. It turned out that Suyu had pretended to be weak in the beginning because he wanted to leave a strand of the power of the holy body on the sword so that it would be easier to track him. From the very beginning, Suyu had never planned to kill him immediately. Instead, he wanted to cut the weeds and pull them up by the roots. He wanted to uproot all of Gu Taishu's people, leaving no one alive. Upon understanding this, Gu Taishu felt a chill run down his spine. At the same time, a great anger welled up in his heart. "Suyu, aren't you too ruthless?" Not only did he kill one of his disciples, but he also wanted to kill all of his disciples. Gu Taishu was deeply remorseful when he felt Suyu's terrifying scheming once again. Wouldn't it be better to hide in the dark and accumulate strength? Why did he run out and openly challenge Suyu? Now, he had been targeted by Suyu. He was like a mouse that had been discovered by a shrewd old cat, and his nest had been discovered by the old cat. "All of you leave," Gu Taishu roared as if he was facing a formidable enemy. He held the 9 ominous origin sword in his hand. The disciples were stunned. Master, that's the human clan's divine physique. He's your sworn enemy, isn't he? Yes, Master. Didn't you say we could kill him easily? Why should we be afraid? This time, Master, please don't show any mercy to him. Just kill him on the spot. Gu Taishu's face was as gloomy as water. He bellowed in a low voice, I told you to leave, so leave immediately. Feeling Gu Taishu's sternness, the disciples had to leave the fallen star one after another, fleeing in different directions. It had to be said that they were quite experienced. If the enemy came to encircle them, it would be impossible to kill them all. Unfortunately, their opponent was Suyu. They had just flown out of the gloomy island. A giant net made of 9-colored energy fell from the sky. 3 of the disciples were caught off guard and were enveloped by it. Before they could resist, the 9-colored energy exploded in an instant, blowing the 3 disciples to pieces. Finally, the rest of the disciples realized the intense danger and fled frantically. Bang! However, giant 9-colored palms fell from the sky one after another. One by one, they were crushed into a mist of blood. Seeing this, Gu Taishu's eyes were wide open. So you stop right now. These were all disciples he had cultivated with countless efforts. Now they were all killed by Suyu. Master, save me. The scaled woman was so scared that her face turned pale. She, who had already escaped, came back cleverly and fled to Gu Taishu. Gu Taishu rushed up immediately. The rest of the disciples had been killed mercilessly. She was the only one left. Su, don't be afraid, I'm coming. Gu Taishu roared. Boom. However, a giant palm fell with a rumble. The woman, who was close to him, was crushed into the meteorite on the spot. Then, a very clear sound was heard. The female disciple was crushed into a mist of blood. Gu Taishu looked at the mist of blood floating in front of him, unable to accept the cruel scene in front of him. Just a moment ago, they were chatting and laughing. In the blink of an eye, they were all killed mercilessly. At this moment, Gu Taishu was extremely furious. His eyes were red like an enraged beast, and he looked coldly at Suyu, who was stepping on the 9-colored holy light and walking towards him. You are too cold-blooded, too heartless, Gu Taishu said bitterly. Suyu put his hands behind his back. His expression was very cold, without the slightest bit of emotion. Don't you feel cold when you eat people? Don't you feel heartless? Suyu said calmly, If I kill you, I believe that people will only think that I am eliminating evil for the people, not that I am cold-blooded. A group of heartless, man-eating things had the nerve to accuse Suyu of being cold-blooded? Suyu, I will kill you. Gu Taishu roared angrily, holding the 9 ominous origin sword in his hand, and charged toward Suyu. Suyu said indifferently, You are probably not qualified to fight with me. He weaved his hands together. He muttered a very mysterious incantation. It was a secret technique from the Book of Darkness, which he had comprehended for 30,000 years. Its power was unimaginable. As he muttered the incantation, the nearby islands suddenly burned automatically. Even Gu Taishu's body began to burn. Even the 9 ominous origin sword in his hand was no exception. Hellfire Sky. Suyu murmured softly, saying the 4 words. Once this secret technique was executed, it could incinerate everything in the world into nothingness. Not even dregs would be left. Except for Suyu himself, nothing in the surroundings could be spared. Chapter 2796. He tried to extinguish the flames on his body, but he couldn't succeed. He could only watch as his body was burned into nothingness. Suyu stared at him indifferently. He sighed silently in his heart. It was time to end it. The feud between the two had lasted for hundreds of years. Finally, it had come to an end. However, at this moment, in the void, it was raining cats and dogs. It was not ordinary rain. It was the water of the abyss. It was cold and piercing and contained a very special power. The flames drawn by Suyu's secret skill of the heavenly book were extinguished. At the same time, a compassionate and magnificent voice came from above. God has the virtue of cherishing life. Why don't you put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha? So you looked up. A warship flying the flag of Nirvana slowly glided over their heads. The water of the abyss was pouring down from the ship. At the same time, at the bow of the ship stood a fat monk with wide ears and a belly exposed. He put his palms together and smiled benevolently. His cultivation was unfathomable. At least, so you couldn't see through him. He should be at least in the middle stage of the master of the heavenly law. He was probably at the same level as the ancient gods and the masters. Nirvana. Suyu murmured. Suyu had been in constant contact with this force since he arrived in the great beginning realm. What left the deepest impression was the path of faith. Sheng Yuanxin was also controlled by Nirvana and was still in the Nirvana organization. He didn't know if she was still alive. Looking at Gu Taishu, Suyu's eyes flashed with coldness. He activated the secret skill again, ready to end him. Swish! However, a ray of light came from the warship and enveloped Gu Taishu. It was space transportation, and he was going to be brought back to the warship. Suyu's face was indifferent. Using the secret skill of space in front of the space master? Come back, he shouted softly. Gu Taishu, who was about to be saved, withdrew the space transportation light around him. He was teleported to Suyu's side. The monk with wide ears and fat face took a step forward. As he stepped into the void, holy golden lotuses bloomed around him, illuminating the void. Benefactor, put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha, he said again. Suyu's eyes were cold as he pointed at Gu Taishu. The butcher's knife? Do you know who I've killed? He is a master of the 9 vicious ones. The number of people he has eaten and the number of living beings he has killed is probably more than you have ever seen. By killing such people, I am enforcing justice on behalf of heaven. If you insist on saving him, you will be harming the common people and helping the wicked. The wide-eared, fat-faced monk was still smiling. Not at all. As the Buddhist saying goes, saving a life is more meritorious than building a 7-story pagoda. Even if he is a great evil person, there is still a possibility for him to repent. He looked at Suyu and said, I can see that you have a strong, murderous aura, and your whole body is full of evil energy. You look like a demon. I hope that you will wake up in time and stop being so stubborn. Hearing this, Suyu laughed angrily. What a good monk who inverts right from wrong. Gu Taishu's blood-curdling history was erased by the phrase, there's a possibility of repentance. Suyu was carrying out justice on behalf of heaven, but he was seen as killing the innocent. What right do you have to forgive Gu Taishu and ask him to repent on behalf of all the living creatures he has killed? Suyu asked coldly. The wide-eared, fat-faced monk's smile did not diminish. He put his palms together and said, Of course it's Buddha. Buddha is the human heart. The human heart? Humph. Such a Buddha is more like a demon. Only a demon would condone a demon. The wide-eared, fat-faced monk stopped smiling and looked solemn. Benefactor, you have been possessed by a demon. If you continue to be stubborn, you will fall into the path of demons forever. I hope you will wake up soon. He kept saying that others would be confused and those who did not listen would be possessed by a demon. How could such a person with such a glib tongue be a person of the path of Buddhism? He was more like a person of the path of demons. Get out of my way, or I will kill you too. So you said coldly. To deal with a bloody and cruel existence like Gu Taishu, the only way was to kill him. The wide-eared, fat-faced monk shook his head in disappointment. Amitabha, benefactor, you have been possessed by a demon. I can only uphold the teachings of Buddhism and eliminate demons for the human world. He did not care about the real demon. Not only did he want to save the demon, but he also wanted to eliminate the person who destroyed the demon. It should be said that he was blind. Or did he have ulterior motives? Suyu laughed loudly. Fine, then you can treat me as a demon. Let me, a demon, destroy you, a false Buddha, hellfire sky. Countless words of the heavenly book immediately detonated everything within range. The warship not far away bore the brunt of the explosion. It was ignited on the spot, and a raging fire was ignited. The fire was extremely peculiar, and it was impossible for a human to extinguish it. Fortunately, there was the water of the abyss on the warship, and they managed to control the fire in a hurry. The wide-eared, fat-faced monk's face was solemn, and his eyes widened in anger. "Demon, you are too presumptuous. I must subdue you today, you demon. Virokana, Virokana." He shook his sleeves. It flew into the air. It released an incomparably intense holy light. The light was so intense that it was like a small sun hanging in the sky. Under the illumination of the light, the hellfire sky was immediately suppressed, and it could not spread further. Suyu's eyes were cold, and his heart suddenly beat faster. His holy body had reached the upper-class state. Extinguish. The nine-colored light on his body suddenly swept out in all directions. Like a tornado, it instantly swept away his kasaya and tore it into pieces. The wide-eared, fat-faced monk was shocked. The upper-class human holy body. When he came out to meddle in other people's business just now, Suyu happened to retract his holy body and only use the heavenly book of darkness. Now that he used it, the fat-faced monk was shocked. "Wrong, I am a demon." Suyu threw a punch. The power of the holy body erupted, and with an overwhelming momentum, it landed on the wide-eared, fat-faced monk's chest. The latter hurriedly resisted. He opened his mouth, and a Buddhist relic appeared. The Buddhist power contained in it was shockingly terrifying, and it immediately resisted the power of the holy body. However, it only resisted for a moment. The wide-eared, fat-faced monk, together with his beads, kept rolling on the ground. When he crawled to his feet, his chest was badly mutilated, and his Buddhist beads also had cracks. There were faint signs of it breaking. The monk was shocked, and he stared at Suyu in extreme fear. At this moment, how could he dare to stay and fight? He picked up Gu Taishu and rushed onto the warship, saying, "Let's go." The warship immediately turned into a beam of light and shot away. Suyu snorted lightly and immediately chased after it, bombarding the hull of the ship continuously. Creak! The warship rumbled violently, and it was about to be destroyed by Suyu. The monk on the ship was extremely shocked, and he hurriedly said, "The power of faith." All of a sudden, inside the warship, countless space caverns were opened, and innumerable chanting sounds came from them. The chanting was full of faith. The faith converged into an invisible force, and it greatly resisted Suyu's attacks. Seizing the opportunity, the warship sped up and disappeared without a trace. Suyu chased for a while and felt the burden on his heart increase, so he had to stop. If he continued, he might trigger a demon again. "Meddlesome thing," Suyu said coldly. His eyes were filled with worry. Gu Taishu had survived the disaster, and one day he would make a comeback. At that time, if he broke through to a higher level of the 9 vicious secret techniques, he would be in big trouble. Chapter 2797. His only gain this time was that he had successfully foiled Gu Taishu's scheme. Not a single one of his descendants was spared. He was also seriously injured. For the time being, there was no need to worry. Moreover, he had attacked several times, suppressing all powerful enemies in the void. Anyone who witnessed this would not dare to act presumptuously for a short period of time. It was time to go back. He raised his palm and quickly returned to the heavenly court with his spatial domain. At this moment, the sinful girl had recovered by more than half. He was currently recuperating and should be able to fully recover within half a month. In the current heavenly court, she and Suyu were the strongest. If the end of an era were to come, when the defensive array formation outside the heavenly courts was ineffective, he and sinful girl were the final barrier. If they could not do it, then they could only retreat back to the Bad Night Crossing Lotus Seat. At the mention of the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Throne, Suyu murmured, "It's about time to prepare the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Throne." If they waited until the epic was destroyed and the heavenly court could no longer hold on, then it would be too late. He had to first send the person he needed into the Evil Crossing Lotus Seat, just in case. However, the problem was who should be deployed. The people of the heavenly court were all people who had walked all the way from the Remnant region. Due to the limited space of the evil traversing Lotus Seat, it could only hold less than a tenth of it. If they abandoned 90% of the people, it would definitely be unfair to the beings of the remnant realm. However, indecisiveness would only lead to chaos. He could only choose the most important ones among them. For example, the Cauldron organization, the 9 prefectures of the past, the true dragon, the deity domain, and other living beings. For example, Emperor Star Reign and other friendly forces from the 8 star civilizations. They were the primary targets. As for those who gathered in the remnant regions and the heavenly court later on, they would be selected based on merit. He looked for Yu Xiangwan and decided to leave this matter to her. Brother Su, Yu Xiangwan smiled bitterly. I can't do this. This kind of work was very offensive. This concerned everyone's life and death. Who wouldn't care? Who wouldn't hate someone who had been abandoned? At that time, it was hard to say whether or not he could keep his life. So he was also in a difficult position. This matter was rather thorny. He couldn't do it himself. After all, he already knew the method of refining the divine body. It was a belief, so he couldn't lose people's trust. However, if he forced Yu Xiangwan to do it, it would be extremely dangerous for him. In the face of a life-threatening threat, anyone could do anything extreme. Therefore, it was indeed a headache to hand over this matter to someone. He was in a dilemma. King of Darkness reported that there was a huge commotion in a corner of the heavenly court. The creatures of the remnant realm and those who had joined later were in a standoff, and a war had already erupted. The number of casualties had already exceeded 10,000. Suyu furrowed his brows. At the moment of destruction of this era, there was no room for internal strife. Didn't you notice anything strange before? Suyu questioned. It was impossible for such a large-scale confrontation to happen suddenly. There must have been some clues beforehand. It could be said that King of Darkness did not notice it earlier. It could be said that he failed in his duty. The King of Darkness immediately said, after Cauldron Zun left, the 2 sides started to have conflicts. We tried our best to mediate, but he hesitated for a moment and did not continue. It seemed to be afraid of something. Why can't I tell you? Suyu asked. King of Darkness lowered his voice and transmitted his voice. It was Ancestor Slave who instructed us. We didn't dare to pursue the matter. Firstly, at that time, Suyu happened to be pursuing Gu Taishu outside and was not in the heavenly court, so he did not dare to pursue the matter. Secondly, he was worried that if he pursued the matter too deeply, it would cause the ancestor of slaves to be disgusted and leave the heavenly courts. Such an ancestral-level expert would be of great help to the heavenly court. If they left now, it would be a great loss. After listening to this, Suyu did not say anything, but Yu Xiangwan was already angry. Bah, Ancestor Slave, what is this? Suyu worked hard to expel foreign forces, but he provoked internal strife in the heavenly court. This is treachery, Yu Xiangwan said. Ancestor Slave fled to the heavenly court to avoid Gu Taishu. What was the result? Did he feel the slightest bit grateful? Not only did he not, but he also secretly caused trouble. Suyu calmed down and said why. Ancestor Slave couldn't have eaten too much and provoked trouble for no reason. Could he? King of Darkness said, according to our secret investigation, after the arrival of Ancestor Slave, foreign forces have attached themselves to Ancestor Slave and vaguely regarded him as the backbone. The foreign forces he was talking about. They all came to rely on Ancestor Slave after the heavenly court stabilized. They did not contribute to the establishment of the heavenly court, so they had little sense of belonging to the heavenly court. They did not regard themselves as people of the heavenly court. Therefore, when the ancestral level strong, who also came from the outside world, Ancestor Slave, appeared, they all treated him as the backbone. Ancestor Slave did not want to become Suyu's vassal, so he pushed the boat with the current and accepted them. After that, the conflict seemed to be natural. Yu Xiangwan said angrily, a group of ingrates, we should not have taken them in. It is not too late to drive them away now. So he was lost in thought. After a while, his eyes flashed slightly, and he said, King of Darkness, mediate, let our own people make way. Hearing this, King of Darkness was surprised. Cauldron Zun, this will cause dissatisfaction among our own people, won't it? He really couldn't understand Su Yu's approach. How could there be people who wronged their own people and let outsiders take advantage of them? Their own people had worked hard to conquer the heavenly court, but in the end, they would let outsiders take advantage of them effortlessly? Do as I say. So you said firmly. King of Darkness's persuasion was useless, so he could only sigh, yes. In his heart, he really felt that those who were sacrificed were not worth it. After all the hard work, their status was not even as high as those outsiders. Cauldron Zun's decision was really stupid. However, he still did as he was told. Under the guidance of the Cauldron, the struggle between the two sides stopped. The key to the dispute was a spiritual vein. Because the heavenly court had a large population, resources were extremely scarce, especially spiritual veins, which were even rarer. The destruction of the era was imminent. If one day, all kinds of reserves were insufficient, spiritual veins were the things that maintained their minimum living standards. Therefore, every spiritual vein must be fought for. As a judge, the Cauldron sentenced this spiritual vein that should have belonged to their own forces to the new vassal forces. Naturally, it attracted great dissatisfaction from the local forces. But what could they do about it? The prestige of the Cauldron was there, and no one dared to defy it. On the contrary, many of the new vassal forces were very excited. In a secret stronghold, with the leaders of the 9 new vassal forces as representatives, they gathered together for a discussion. They could see the irrepressible joy on their faces. The distribution plan of the spiritual vein that we won this time is decided. A group of people discussed. Oh, thanks to our unity, the people of the heavenly court saw our power and had to retreat. If we had known this, we should have united to fight for more benefits. Everyone said. One of them said, I think that the Cauldron is not looking at us, but at the ancestor of slaves. Without him to control the situation, we are just a group of mobs in the eyes of the Cauldron. Why would he give us face and let the people of the heavenly court retreat and let us reap the benefits for nothing? Everyone was shocked and deeply agreed. They had more than 1 or 2 conflicts with the people of the heavenly court before. Chapter 2798. Only this time was very different from the past. As they were talking, a hoarse voice drifted over. It seems you are not too stupid. At the entrance of the secret room, an old man wearing animal skin walked in with his hands clasped behind his back. It was the slave master. He was followed by the beast slave king and other outstanding people. The masters of the forces stood up and cupped their fists respectfully. Greetings, slave master. The slave master naturally sat in the main seat and nodded. Sit down, everyone. Everyone sat down and began to flatter him. The slave master is so powerful that even the arrogant Cauldron has to show some respect. In the future, we will be loyal to the slave master. After tasting the sweetness, they respected the slave master even more. The crowd was very happy. Only the beast slave king was frowning. The situation in front of him was completely different from what he had imagined. He had found his people to help Su Yu get through this difficult time together. He did not want to drag Su Yu down and cause internal strife. Looking at the crowd who seemed to have taken advantage of him, he was disgusted. Don't be happy too early. If the holy body soon knows about this, he can take back everything you have. The crowd was suddenly awakened, as if a basin of ice water had been poured over them. Indeed, Su Yu was now the well-deserved number 1 person in the void. Once the holy body was activated, he could look down on everyone. Even Gu Taishu, who was previously fierce and powerful, fled at the sight of him. One could imagine how powerful he was. In some sense, the Heaven Court was also under Su Yu's command. So, you should stop here. If you continue to make trouble, it will arouse the dissatisfaction of the holy body Su, and the loss will outweigh the gain, the beast slave king warned. The crowd immediately quieted down. Su Yu was indeed a knife hanging over their heads. The slave master said indifferently, Don't worry, the Heaven Court does not belong to Su Yu alone. It belongs to all of us. He looked at the beast slave king. He warned him not to talk nonsense and disturb the morale of the army. The beast slave king felt it was extremely ironic. If the Heaven Court does not belong to Su Yu, does it belong to outsiders like us? It should be known that the Heaven Court was won by Su Yu and the creatures of the Remnant region with their blood and lives. They were a group of people who had been sheltered, but not only did they not know how to be grateful, but they also wanted to call themselves masters. The beast-slave monarch said, "Old ancestor, Sage Su's strength is outstanding. It's best if we don't provoke him." He couldn't figure out why the ancestor was so determined to seize Su Yu's ruling rights. Wasn't it good to be honest? The slave ancestor said indifferently, "Su Yu's strength is really good, but he was lucky enough to activate the saint body. It's actually nothing much. That bit of strength can only be considered the bravery of an ordinary man. It is of little use in resisting the destruction of an era." Everyone heard this. His spirits were immediately lifted. Ancestor Slave is right. Think about what sort of calamity the destruction of that era was. It's useless to rely on one person's bravery. Yeah, we still need seniors like Ancestor Slave who have survived the destruction of an era to guide us. That's right. In my opinion, if that sacred physique Su has any self-awareness, it would be best for him to hand over the commanding authority to avoid harming us. Yes, Su Xingti is only suitable to listen to Ancestor Slave's orders. Being a pawn is his best identity. As for being a ruler, he is still lacking a lot. The beast slave king heard the conversation. He felt even more bitterly disappointed. Is this the person the heaven wants to protect? He wants to become the master and use Su Yu as a slave when he hasn't even gained a firm foothold? He was extremely remorseful. Why did he believe that his people had no ambition? In the end, not only did he not help Su Yu, but he also attracted an ingrate. The slave ancestor continued, "The spirit vein obtained today is insignificant. We need more fairness and justice." His words roused everyone's spirits. "Dare I ask, Ancestor Slave, what is your plan?" Everyone asked with concern. All they could think of was to fight for more resources. The slave ancestor's eyes lit up. "I received news that Su Yu is back, but he is seriously injured and is now recuperating in seclusion. Everything has been handed over to his trusted friend, Yu Xiangwan." Everyone continued to listen. So what? As far as they knew, Yu Xiangwan was absolutely loyal to Su Yu. It was impossible for her to betray Su Yu and benefit them. Before he went into seclusion, Su Yu gave Yu Xiangwan a task, and that was to select the people to enter the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat, the slave ancestor said. As soon as he said that, everyone was shocked. What? Su Yu also has a Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat. Everyone was shocked. The Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat was widely recognized as a heaven-defying treasure that could survive the destruction of an era. In the current era, countless strong men wanted to replicate it, but the result was a failure. The ruler of the 8-star civilization once wanted to create the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat and use it to deceive living creatures into mining for them. In fact, they did not create the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat. Because many of the key materials were only available in the previous era, the current era was unable to produce them. He has such a thing, but he didn't take it out earlier. It seems that Su Yu is not as selfless as I thought. He actually hid such a good show. I respected him so much before, but I didn't expect him to be such a selfish person. Their conversation chilled the beast ancestor's heart. This was probably the so-called kindness and enmity. Not only did they give him favors, but they also gave him hatred. What a bunch of ingrates. Ancestor Slave, Su Yu intends to put the Cauldron and the people he is familiar with into the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat. And we, the vassal forces, will be left to our own devices, right? A master of an influence said coldly, feeling abandoned. Ancestor Slave nodded. At present, the situation is indeed like this. Everyone said, Ancestor Slave, please save us. We all have the right to survive the destruction of an era. Why should Su Yu only care about his own people? This was exactly what Ancestor Slave wanted. He said, so, I need you to come with me to force her to hand over the right to choose. Force Xiangwan to abdicate? Some people hesitated. But won't Su Yu be angry because of this? Ancestor Slave said casually, don't worry. Su Yu lacks someone to guide him, so he won't dare to do anything to me. Moreover, we are pursuing him properly, so he can't say anything. Everyone continued to discuss and finally decided to force her to abdicate. The beast ancestor slave was calm and collected. When the meeting ended and everyone dispersed, he immediately went to the nine-dragon ancient god mountain. He was looking for Su Yu, who was in seclusion. However, before he could go up the mountain, he was stopped at the foot of the mountain. "I am looking for Su Yu. There is an urgent report," the beast ancestor slave said anxiously. Once the nightmare crossing lotus seat fell into the hands of ancestor slave, it would be impossible to take it back. "Su Yu is recuperating in seclusion. Please go back," the guard said expressionlessly. "But, there is no but, please go back." In desperation, the beast ancestor slave had to leave. On the mountain, in the secret room, the scene appeared in front of Su Yu. Chapter 2799. He did not have a good impression of the beast slave king. Who would have thought that he would come forward to inform them? It was a little surprising. The sinful girl, who was sitting cross-legged beside Su Yu, murmured, "You pretended to be seriously injured on purpose and refused to meet the informant. What are you trying to do?" Su Yu smiled mysteriously. "Heavenly secrets cannot be revealed." The sinful lady gripped the sinful sword tightly and cast a sidelong glance at Su Yu. "What heavenly mystery? It's just another plot against me. Don't make it sound so bad. Jiang Tai Gong is fishing, and those who are willing will take the bait," Su Yu said. Sinful lady sighed softly. "I'm starting to pity that slave ancestor. Anyone who was schemed against by Su Yu would not have a good ending, including her other half. He had also been tricked by Su Yu many times, and his soul had been destroyed in the end." At that time, Yu Xiangwan and a group of core members of the Cauldron were secretly discussing many matters regarding the nightmare crossing lotus seat. The King of Darkness looked at the list and felt much better. "At least Cauldron Zun is on our side," the King of Darkness thought. On the list were mainly the members of the Cauldron, followed by the living beings of the Jinlong continent and the Juzhou continent. The last few were creatures from the remnant realms. However, the King of Darkness also sensed the danger. If those who were not on the list knew about the existence of the list, they would probably be in an uproar. At the very least, he would lose the confidence he had accumulated over a long period of time. If worse came to worst, there might be riots. It's not easy being a Cauldron master. The King of Darkness sighed. When he looked at Yu Xiangwan, who personally wrote the name list, he sighed even more. But the one who had it the hardest is you. If the name list was leaked as the one who drafted the list, what would happen to Yu Xiangwan? He would definitely be hated by countless living beings. She might even find him for revenge. His life could be threatened at any time. Yu Xiangwan had a bitter expression on her face. "I know, right? This mission was a life-threatening mission. Since everyone has no objections, then it's decided," said Yu Xiangwan. But his voice was still in the air. An extremely loud noise suddenly came from outside the secret room. At the same time, there was a fierce fight. Before they could react, the door to the secret chamber was forcefully pushed open. Thousands of new vassal forces, under the leadership of Ancestor Slave, forced back all the guards outside the door. Then, he blasted open the door of the secret room in an extremely barbaric manner. Seeing that, Yu Xiangwan slammed the table and stood up angrily. "Are you guys trying to rebel?" He was having a secret meeting with the upper echelons of the Cauldron, but Ancestor knew and the others had actually barged in. If this wasn't rebellion, then what was it? Ancestor Slave had an indifferent expression. "You are the one who wants to rebel." He glanced at the conference table and grabbed the list in his hand. He said coldly, "Tell me, what is this thing?" Yu Xiangwan instantly felt weak. Ancestor Nu said sternly, "Let me tell you, this is the name list of Evil Crossing Lotus Constellation. Let me see who's up there." With a flick of his finger, all the names on the list appeared in midair. "Look, they are all members of the Cauldron. Only a few of them are left for the living beings of the remnant realms of the past. Our new vassal forces don't have a single one," Ancestor Nu said sternly. The leaders of the various forces who had followed them and were furious. "Despicable. You have the grievous crossing Lotus Throne. Why are you taking it out?" How dare you sneakily abandon our new vassal forces and only choose your own people? You are the ones who are really rebelling. Sage Su clearly said that anyone who joins the heavenly court will be treated equally. But did you do it? No. You have betrayed Sage Su. With just a few words, they actually pinned the label of betraying Su Yu and creating trouble for Yu Xiongwan. Yu Xiongwan was trembling with anger. You are pestering me endlessly. The grievous crossing Lotus Throne is Sage Su's private property. He can accommodate whoever he wants without anyone's consent. Moreover, it is already a great kindness of Sage Su to accept you into the heavenly court. How can you say that he has abandoned you? However, his words turned a deaf ear to the new vassal forces who had ulterior motives. They were howling to themselves. Today, if you don't give us an explanation, we will not be finished. That's right. Since we have been abandoned, we might as well drag this heartless and unscrupulous thing to perish together with us. Their words were harsh. There seemed to be an area of impending chaos. The King of Darkness and the others were shocked. How did the news of the existence of the grievous crossing Lotus Throne spread in advance? Who was the one who told the new vassal forces about the name list that they were discussing in secret? However, this was not the time to pursue responsibility. It was how to quell the impending chaos. Staring at the group of ingrates in front of him, the King of Darkness was filled with killing intent. If he left this group of people alive, they would be a disaster sooner or later. Why not take this opportunity to exterminate them justifiably? At this time, Ancestor Nu stood up and spoke. He waved the name list in his hand and said, "If this name list is spread, what will happen? Don't you understand?" Yu Xiongwan and the others' expressions changed again and again. Of course they understood. Once it was spread out, it would definitely lead to a huge riot. The order that maintained the heavenly court would collapse instantly. All of them present would not have a good ending. Yu Xiongwan shouted in a low voice, "Ancestor Nu, what are you trying to do?" "What am I trying to do?" Ancestor Nu stretched out his hand. "Hand over the grievous crossing Lotus Throne. We will decide the right to enter." Yu Xiongwan was extremely displeased. "Why should I hand it over to you?" Ancestor Nu said coldly, "Because we will treat everyone fairly and give everyone a fair chance to enter the grievous crossing Lotus Throne." Yu Xiongwan rejected flatly. "Sorry, we cannot trust you." Ancestor Nu waved the name list. "That is not up to you. I will count to 3. If you don't agree, humph." The King of Darkness and the others were shocked and furious. A bunch of ingrates. They actually came to force Su Yu when he was in seclusion. They shouldn't have let them in. Yu Xiongwan and the higher-ups of the Cauldron communicated with their eyes. They helplessly realized a fact. It seemed like they had no other choice but to hand over the grievous crossing Lotus Throne. In the end, Yu Xiongwan said with extreme pain and unwillingness, "Remember your words. Give everyone a fair chance to enter. Otherwise, when Divine Su comes out of seclusion, he will definitely not forgive you." Ancestor Nu said calmly, "Of course, we will keep our promise." Hence, Yu Xiongwan was forced to take out the grievous crossing Lotus Throne and gave it to Ancestor Nu. Ancestor Nu's indifferent face finally revealed a trace of a smile. Finally got it. The leaders of the various forces behind him were also full of joy. With the grievous crossing Lotus Throne, even if the heavenly court was destroyed, they could safely survive the destruction of the era. "Draw up the name list now." Yu Xiongwan stared at them and said. Ancestor Nu did not hesitate and took out a name list that had already been drawn up. "Already prepared?" Yu Xiongwan said angrily. This was clearly a conspiracy that had been planned for a long time. But when she saw the name list, Yu Xiongwan was even more furious. Chapter 2800. Written on it were all the new vassal forces. Not a single member of the Cauldron. Let's not talk about him breaking his promise. Just such a blatant list was enough to infuriate people. They should at least take care of the members outside the Cauldron. What about Ancestor Nu? Only the new vassal forces were written and no one else was written. Is this what you mean by keeping your promise? Yu Xiongwan questioned. Ancestor Nu said indifferently, "It's not that I broke my promise. It's just that the plan can't keep up with the changes." Our new vassal forces are relatively weak, so the heavenly court should take care of us first, right? You're weak? Yu Xiangwan seemed to have heard the funniest joke. They were the weakest, yet they united and forcefully took away the nightmare, crossing Lotus Throne. That was weak. Yu Xiangwan's face was livid. The biggest mistake of the heavenly court was to accommodate you foreign forces. Without going through the same trials and tribulations, there was no way to trust them. Ancestor Nu's face tightened, a hint of threat in his eyes. Watch your mouth. What do you mean by foreign forces? We are all members of the heavenly court. If you dare to speak nonsense again and destroy the unity of the heavenly court, humph, I will not show mercy. Hearing that, Yu Xiangwan trembled with anger. Unity? What unity? However, in front of Ancestor Nu, he really had to restrain himself and not give him a chance to make a move. Fine, we must report this to Holy Body Su. Yu Xiangwan said fiercely. Ancestor Nu said indifferently. Whatever, we have a clear conscience anyway. If Holy Body Su really cares about the people, he will not blame us. Yu Xiangwan sneered. They still want to stand on the moral high ground and tie a rope around Su Yu's neck? I'm afraid they have made a mistake. Su Yu had never been someone who cared about his reputation. After getting what they wanted, Ancestor Nu and the others left with a nightmare, crossing Lotus Throne. Only Yu Xiangwan and the other core members were left. Bang! King of Darkness hammered the table. Useless. They were a group of natives, yet the nightmare crossing Lotus Throne was taken away by a new force. King of Darkness, these people are not on our side at all. Deploy the army immediately to suppress them and take back the nightmare crossing Lotus Throne. Empress Star Rain joined the Cauldron and said angrily. King of Darkness hesitated. After pondering for a while, he shook his head and said, I'm afraid it won't work. So you had previously instructed them to take good care of the new vassal influences. He had also been ordered by Su Yu to mediate the conflict between the new vassal faction and the local faction, and he had handed over a spiritual pulse to the other party. At this moment, the grievous crossing Lotus had been forcefully seized by them. Su Yu was the only one who could make the decision. They could not rashly suppress the other party in order to avoid incurring Sage Su's dissatisfaction. Why? Empress Star Rain didn't know the inside story, so she asked. The rest of the higher-ups were also extremely dissatisfied. Last time, the dispute over the spirit vein was orchestrated by the Dark King and caused a lot of dissatisfaction. King of Darkness felt bitter and shook his head. I can't tell you for now. The Star Rain Empress ground her teeth. On one hand, she told them not to act against the new vassal forces, and, on the other hand, she said that it was a secret and that she couldn't tell them. She even suspected that the Dark King had received some benefits from the new vassal force. No, we can't let this matter go like this. We must ask Brother Su Yu for help, the Star Rain Empress said. The rest of the higher-ups agreed. How could they allow the new vassal forces to be so rampant? They mobilized a large number of people to look for Su Yu. However, the result was the same as the Beast Slave King. They were all stopped at the foot of the mountain and couldn't go up. They couldn't even see Su Yu. Sage Su is still recuperating in seclusion. Please go back, the guard said expressionlessly. The Star Rain Empress said solemnly, We have something very important to inform Sage Su. It is a matter of life and death. Please inform him. The guard was unperturbed. Sage Su has instructed us not to let anything affect his recovery. The Star Rain Empress said angrily, I am his sister. Can I do that? The guard shook his head impartially. No. Hearing that, the Star Rain Empress went crazy, and the rest of the people were also anxious. Only Yu Xiangwan smiled bitterly. Su Yu, you kept everyone in the dark. Look at how anxious they are. Yu Xiangwan certainly knew that all this was planned by Su Yu. He was also one of the participants. The purpose was naturally that extremely tricky list of names. In another place, many masters of the new vassal forces gathered again. They surrounded the Lotus Throne of Evil Crossing, all of them excited. Ancestor Nu is brilliant. We are impressed. One of the masters was completely convinced. The rest of the people followed suit. Before the plan, they had no idea at all. They didn't believe that they could get the lotus throne of evil crossing. After all, it was a life-saving item. How could the other party hand it over so easily? But in the end, they did it. It was like a dream. It was unbelievable. Ancestor Nu chuckled. It's a piece of cake. Let's act now and get all our people into the lotus throne of evil crossing as soon as possible. In this way, even if Sage Su goes back on his word, he can't chase everyone out. Everyone agreed with him. That night, they deployed a large number of people into the lotus throne of evil crossing. Of course, the resources they fought for in the heavenly court were also taken away. Everything was in order. Only one piece of news spread quickly among the people of the heavenly court. Ancestor Nu and the new vassal forces had forcibly occupied the lotus throne of evil crossing. Not only that, but the list of names that Ancestor Nu had personally drawn up was also widely circulated. In just one night, almost all the forces in the heavenly court had a copy of the news. This caused a huge wave of anger. In an instant, all the forces rushed over and surrounded the lotus throne of evil crossing, fighting with the new vassal forces. Ancestor Nu sat within the lotus throne of evil crossing. When he heard the news, his brows furrowed. How did the news spread so quickly? He had expected that Xiang Wan and the rest would give them a taste of their own medicine and spread the list of names. But he had already calculated it. Before the news spread, they had already settled everything. Their lives were already in the bag. At most, they would all hide in the lotus throne of evil crossing and seal it. What could the outside world do to them? One had to know. The lotus throne of evil crossing could withstand the destruction of an era. They alone could not break the lotus throne of evil crossing. But right now, why did it seem like Xiang Wan had already planned this and had prepared the news in advance? Ancestor Nu suddenly had a bad premonition. He kept feeling that there was an eye in the dark, watching his every move coldly. Is it a misconception? Ancestor Nu muttered to himself. Snatching the lotus throne of evil crossing was my idea. Could it be that someone could predict this? The most important thing now was to calm the local forces of the heavenly court. If they were not careful today, it could easily cause chaos. Of course, the direction of the chaos was not the higher-ups of the heavenly court, but them. Thinking about this, Ancestor Nu's heart suddenly thumped. Chapter 28:01. He realized that someone was plotting against him. They were ready to throw the hot potato, the nightmare-crossing lotus, to him. His nostrils flared as he sneered. You want me to take the blame for you and become a scapegoat? Unfortunately, I have already expected this. To be able to survive from the last era to the present, Ancestor Nu was not an easy person to deal with. Before the robbery, he was prepared. He immediately appeared and stood above the nightmare-crossing lotus, announcing to the crowd, "Everyone, please calm down." In his tone, there was a rare hint of a smile. To be honest, we did not want to monopolize the nightmare-crossing lotus, but we had no choice. Ancestor Nu said with a pained look. It was the holy body, Su, who pitted us for being homeless, so he forced us to stay in the nightmare-crossing lotus. In the crowd, Yu Xiangwan, who was hidden among them, secretly said, "How shameless. It was clearly you who robbed it, but you said Su forced you?" However, Su had already predicted what you wanted to do. Now that you have taken a step forward, it is impossible to turn back. At this time, the surrounding experts were all shocked and bewildered. Nonsense. How could the holy body Su hand over the nightmare-crossing lotus to you? Do you really think we are easy to deceive? The holy body Su did not take care of us meritorious subjects, nor did he take care of the cauldron. Instead, he took care of you new vassal forces who did not contribute at all. Ancestor Nu was prepared for this. He chuckled and took out a spiritual vein voucher and a video. You may not know this, but a few days ago, we asked for a spiritual vein. When we were arguing with your local forces, it was the holy body Su who sent the top officials of the cauldron and sided with us. The video showed that the King of Darkness was siding with them. Not only did he not punish them for causing trouble, but he also gave them the spiritual vein. The cauldron is a force created by the holy body Su. Without the holy body Su's order, would the cauldron dare to side with us? Ancestor Nu said calmly. He smiled to himself. Suyu had shot himself in the foot, right? His favoritism in the past was now the best protective talisman. Sure enough, the angry crowd began to speculate. It seemed that the holy body Su really favored them. It was not impossible to give them the nightmare crossing lotus. Seeing that the crowd was gradually calming down, Ancestor Nu continued. Everyone, please don't look at us with strange gazes. We are the same as you. We are all members of the heavenly court. If you insist on causing trouble here, you will be destroying the unity of the heavenly court. Not only will I punish you, but you will also not be able to pass the test of sacred Su physique. The threat was first, and the temptation was next. Of course, in consideration of the fact that we are all compatriots, I will release 100,000 slots for everyone. Choose those who are sensible and consider the big picture first. Hearing this, many forces that were not united in the first place all had their own thoughts. The so-called understanding was to not make a fuss. Now, whoever caused a ruckus would not be able to obtain a spot on the grievance crossing lotus seat. As expected, the various forces, which had already calmed down, quietened down. Ancestor Nu was secretly disdainful. A bunch of idiots. Just a small favor, and they were completely subdued. But, at this moment, a discordant voice rang out. Don't believe him. Su Shangti was heavily injured by him and forced to go into seclusion. Someone in the crowd suddenly shouted. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. The voice continued to fan. Ancestor Nu colluded with Gu Taishu and betrayed Su Shangti, causing him to be heavily injured. What people feared the most was incitement. Those who did not know the truth and were dissatisfied immediately questioned. That's right. Su Shangti is so powerful. Why would he be heavily injured? Everyone, it seems like there really is a problem. Gu Taishu only appeared after Ancestor Nu came. That's right. Su Shangti has always been fair with rewards and punishments. Why would he side with a new vassal force that did not contribute anything for no reason? At this moment, the bewitching voice spoke again. Everyone, Ancestor Nu and the others want to destroy our home and take all our resources. Everyone came to a realization. At the same time, the members of the Cauldron suddenly surrounded them from all directions. The experts led by the King of Darkness surrounded the grievance crossing lotus seat. Su Shangti has orders. The King of Darkness shook his hand. A banner that stretched across the sky appeared in front of everyone's eyes. On it was written, I was plotted against by a traitor and only regained my consciousness now. I heard that a traitor is using my name to cause trouble. I order the Cauldron to eliminate the traitor and restore peace to the heavenly court. It's Su Shangti. Sure enough, Ancestor Nu and the others not only plotted against Su Shangti, but also used his name to deceive everyone. You really deserve to die. How powerful was Su Yu's appeal? Once a word was spoken, the whole world followed. Ancestor Nu's face changed dramatically. Was Su Yu crazy? Without his guidance, how could the heavenly court survive the destruction of the era? Wait, all of this was secretly ordered by Su Yu. He was the one who plotted behind the scenes. Wait, grievance crossing lotus seat, we can return now. Ancestor Nu immediately waved his hand and let the people who entered quickly retreat. There was still room for redemption. As long as they continued to stay in the heavenly court, there would be a day for them to make a comeback. However, how could Su Yu give them another chance? Swish, but around the grievance crossing lotus seat, there was a surge of space energy. The grievance crossing lotus seat was instantly transported out. Yu Xiangwan jumped out from the darkness and shouted, Not good. They want to use the grievance crossing lotus seat to escape. The King of Darkness immediately led the forces of the Cauldron to rush over. Ancestor Nu suddenly felt that something was wrong. If he really left with the grievance crossing lotus seat, he would not be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. No matter what, he would be accused of fleeing in fear of punishment. No, it's not us. Before his voice fell, the grievance crossing lotus seat had already been activated and disappeared in an instant. When it reappeared, it was already in the void. The King of Darkness's eyes flashed, and immediately led many forces to rush out, roaring, "Subordinates of the Cauldron, destroy the rebel army!" Many members of the Cauldron, as well as the Zhenlong, Jiuzhou, and other creatures, rushed into the void. They took the lead and chased after the grievance crossing Lotus Seat. Above the grievance crossing Lotus Seat, Ancestor Nu was furious, using his arms to try to stop the grievance crossing Lotus Seat from leaving and bring it back to the heavenly court. This was the only way he could explain that he had been framed by someone else. However, the grievance crossing Lotus Seat was automatically activated, pushing him into the depths of the void, until the creatures of the heavenly court could no longer detect it. The grievance crossing Lotus Seat finally stopped. A silver-haired figure also stepped on the ripples of space and slowly appeared. Suyu. Ancestor Nu seemed to feel something and suddenly looked over, his face full of hatred. "Why did you plot against me?" Suyu said lightly. "If you had no disloyalty, will my plot have worked?" His eyes slowly became fierce. "I was kind enough to take you in, but you don't know how to be grateful. But you want to occupy the heavenly court, and you also want to enslave me to become your subordinate, right?" Ancestor Nu tried to calm down and argued. "Do you have evidence?" "It's all just your guess. As the master of the heavenly court, you should have some evidence for everything, right?" Chapter 28:02. He was confident that Suyu had no evidence. Did he leave any evidence for what he said that day? However, did Suyu need evidence? "Who gave you the illusion that I am a man of evidence?" Suyu said lightly. Ancestor Nu's expression was slightly stagnant. As the master of the heavenly court, you naturally need evidence to convince the people. If you act recklessly, won't you lose the support of the people? Suyu laughed, and the surface of his body gradually overflowed with nine-colored light. "People support? Only by killing you can I rally the people's support," Suyu said calmly. Ancestor Nu stared at the power of the holy body and suddenly became alert. "Holy body, Su, you have to figure out the situation. Without me, who will guide you through the destruction of the era?" This was probably the biggest reliance of Ancestor Nu. His strength may not be as good as Suyu's, but the experience of crossing the destruction of the previous era was unique. In the face of the destruction of the era, everyone was in danger. They should be around him closely and listen to his guidance. Suyu smiled lightly. "You guide me? When we attacked the heavenly court, why didn't you come out to guide us? When we set up the formation, why didn't you come out to guide us? When we were all set up, why did you come out to guide us? Not only that, but you also want to seize the command of the heavenly court and turn everyone into your slaves? Who gave you the courage?" The slave ancestor felt that Suyu was unreasonable, so he said eloquently, "Suyu, use your brain and think about how precious my guidance is, okay? Don't be like a brainless teenager who only knows how to act recklessly." When Suyu heard this, he just smiled and said nothing. Act recklessly? Ancestor Nu had been hiding in the corner of nothingness for too long and did not know what had happened to the 8-star civilization. Moreover, he did not know what kind of person Suyu was. "You really should have promised me first before coming to the heavenly court," Suyu said indifferently. The nine-colored power on the surface of his body instantly reached its peak. His killing intent was undisguised. Ancestor Nu was shocked and angry. "You disappoint me so much. You are the master of the heavenly court. How can you be so stupid? Kill me and use me to guide your future?" As soon as his voice fell, a cold figure in a black dress slowly approached. "Can I?" It was the sinful lady. Her expression was calm. Matters related to the destruction of an era are all recorded by the major forces of this era. There's nothing special about it. Among the current powerful forces, there were old monsters who had survived from the previous era. Their experiences had long since been spread throughout the forces. The sinful woman came from the heavenly Tao Palace, so she knew the details of the epic's destruction very well. Perhaps he had a deeper understanding than a mid-stage Tao lord like the ancestor of slaves who fought alone. Suyu's expression was indifferent. "So, ancestor slave, I really don't know why you think so highly of yourself. You probably felt that the people in the heavenly court were just a bunch of mobs." She needed this old ancestor to point out the right path. I think it's probably because it was too easy to enter the heavenly court, which gave you the illusion that I need you very much, Suyu said indifferently. Ancestor Slave trembled in fear. Suyu already had the trump card that he was so proud of. Thinking of this, he temporarily gave up on the idea of controlling the heavenly court. His expression eased up, and he said, "All right, it was this ancestor who didn't consider it thoroughly. This matter ends here, and I will no longer pursue the matter of you plotting against me. Let's just pretend that today's incident never happened." After a pause, he added, "I will also return the nightmare crossing Lotus to you. I hope you can give everyone a satisfactory excuse to suppress their anger." Suyu was expressionless and said lightly, "What if I don't agree?" Ancestor Slave's old face turned cold. "If you don't agree, we will no longer support the heavenly court." Their new vassal force was equivalent to 1/10 of the native forces. In resisting the destruction of the era, it was a force that could not be ignored. He believed that Suyu would not refuse if he was a little rational. "Then don't support it. Go back to where you came from." Suyu responded without hesitation. There was no room for maneuver at all. Ancestor Slave's pupils shrank. "What do you mean? Suyu actually wanted to give up everything they had? Was he crazy?" "I mean exactly what I said." Suyu stepped over. The powerful power of the holy body swept over. He shouted softly, "Subordinates of the Cauldron, attack the nightmare crossing Lotus and expel the traitors. Those who surrender will not be killed, and those who resist will be killed without mercy." As for Ancestor Slave, Suyu would naturally deal with him personally. "Suyu, I'm not afraid of you." Ancestor Slave shouted angrily. He smashed dozens of bottles and jars around him with one palm. Ferocious beasts flew out from each of them. The weakest of them was the early stage of the Heavenly Law Master. There were even 4 mid-stage Heavenly Law Masters, including Ancestor Slave himself. It was equivalent to a total of 5 mid-stage Heavenly Law Masters. No wonder he had the courage to repeatedly challenge Suyu's bottom line. It turned out that he had so many trump cards. "Humph! I have lived one more era than you. How can you look down on me?" Ancestor Slave snorted coldly. So he was not too surprised. Ancestor Slave had lived for one more era. Even if he did not practice and only slept, he should have made some progress. It was not surprising that he had spent one more era to cultivate 4 mid-stage Heavenly Law Masters. "Suyu, it is not too late for you to regret it now. If you really force me to fight, then we will fight to the death. I may not be able to live a good life, but don't think you will be any better." Ancestor Slave threatened. However, Suyu was not moved by this. His expression was indifferent. "Fight to the death. You need to have the ability to do so." Suyu tiptoed. The waves of the power of the holy body rolled out. At the moment, it was only in the state of a second-rate holy body. The power of the holy body was limited. Even so, it still suppressed the 4 demonic beasts and forced them to retreat. As for the early-stage demonic beasts, they were seriously injured on the spot. Ancestor Slave's face sank. He gritted his teeth and said sternly, "Give this human a taste of my power." How could the demonic beasts he had carefully cultivated be so weak? The 4 demonic beasts immediately walked side by side. Each of them spat out a beast core. This was the beast core of a mid-stage Heavenly Law Master. Its power was unimaginable. The 4 beast cores hovered in the air and merged into a giant beast core. In the beast core, a dark purple light was emitted, piercing the remaining power of the holy body and reaching Suyu's body. Suyu's skin immediately turned into dust when he was touched by the residual light. More purple light broke through the power of the holy body and shot out rapidly. If it really hit, Suyu's body would be turned into a cloud of dust. While the 4 demonic beasts were attacking, Ancestor Slave himself was not idle. He opened his mouth and spat out a blood talisman. After the blood talisman appeared, similar talismans appeared on the bodies of the 4 demonic beasts. The demonic beasts who were still calm immediately went crazy. They rushed over with their huge bodies. They sped up the power of the holy body. Moreover, they did not know pain, they did not know fear, and they did not know death. They only knew how to attack crazily. After a few breaths, the power of the holy body was completely dispersed by the demonic beasts. The 4 fused beast cores burst out with destructive purple light, melting everything around them into dust and sand. Suyu himself was submerged in it. Chapter 28:03. Seeing this, Nuzu showed a contemptuous smile. The so-called holy body is just SOSO. To be honest, he had been afraid of the power of the holy body, especially after witnessing Suyu chasing Gutaishu. Unexpectedly, when they really fought, Suyu was so vulnerable. It seems that I overestimated the holy body and underestimated myself. Nuzu laughed at himself. After hiding for an era, when did I become so inferior and timid? After defeating Suyu's holy body, Nuzu regained infinite confidence. Unexpectedly, as soon as his voice fell within the purple light that blotted out the sky, an incomparably huge 9-colored palm reached out without any warning. The palm grasped the 4 merged beast cores in the sky fiercely. The purple light was covered, revealing Suyu, who had been swallowed. He was still standing in the same place, unharmed. Nuzu was shocked. He stared at Suyu's palm, which was holding the 4 beast cores tightly. The closer it was to the beast cores, the stronger the purple light was. Suyu held them with his hand, and he was not hurt. Looking carefully, he found that the 9-colored power in Suyu's palm was more intense than before. It was also the holy body, but now it was like a completely different person. What did you do? Nuzu's heart skipped a beat. He faintly felt that he might have overestimated himself and underestimated the holy body. Suyu did not say a word, but held the 4 beast cores. Then he opened his mouth and swallowed them. What? Nuzu was horrified. The beast cores of the middle stage of the Heaven Law Master could be turned into ashes if he touched them. Suyu swallowed them directly, and it was as if nothing had happened. The beast cores were taken away, and the connection with the original body was cut off. The 4 demonic beasts immediately roared in pain and anger, then charged towards Suyu without any regard for their own safety. It seemed that they were asking for the beast cores. In response, 4 palm prints condensed from the power of the holy body fell from the sky. They were all caught in one hand. Then, Suyu opened his mouth and swallowed them all. His body had been demonized. Once swallowed, it would be impossible to come out again. Nuzu's scalp was numb, and he gasped, You are not a human. How could a human swallow the Heaven Law Master's beast? Suyu burped and said, Now you know. Ancestor Nu felt a chill down his spine. There was finally a deep sense of reverence in his heart. He cupped his fists and said, I had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai and offended divine physique Su. Please forgive me. For someone like him who had lived for countless years, he understood that nothing was more important than life, including dignity. I will let you run for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, Suyu said calmly. Wasn't it too late to apologize now? Ancestor Nu's face turned pale. Run? Where else could he run to now? The destruction of the sacred mountain was imminent. In a world apart from the heavenly courts, where else was there a place of refuge? Holy Physique Su, please give me a chance to turn over a new leaf for the sake of the Beast Slave King. I will definitely turn over a new leaf, Suyu turned a deaf ear. With a flip of his palm, an hourglass appeared. The sand slowly dripped down. When all the drops were finished, it took the time to brew a cup of tea. The countdown has started, Suyu said calmly. Ancestor Nu gritted his teeth and fled madly towards the distance when he saw that the situation was hopeless. He was filled with regret. If he had known this, why would he have stayed in the heavenly court? Now, not only was he driven out, but his life was in danger. No, I still have a chance, Ancestor Nu said unwillingly. I also know a few remaining large islands, where there may be a glimmer of hope. The destruction of the previous era. The islands that were completely preserved were only the 8-star civilizations. However, there were still many islands that, although they had been destroyed, were still intact. Although they were far less powerful than the 8-star civilizations, there were old monsters from the previous era living on them. Presumably, they were also fully prepared to deal with the coming destruction of the era. Previously, Some islands had thrown an olive branch to Ancestor Nu. If he went to surrender, he would definitely be accepted. He was afraid that there was not enough time. He looked up at the sacred mountain that was close at hand, and his heart sank. The destruction of the era would be in the next few days. It might be delayed. However, it might also be ahead of schedule. However, it was better to escape for the time it took to brew a cup of tea first. Time flashed by. The time it took to brew a cup of tea was up. At this time, Ancestor Nu was completely far away from the heavenly court. With his own strong perception, he did not sense any aura fluctuations behind him. It was enough to show that he had successfully gotten rid of Suyu. Let me run for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea first. You are really arrogant. Ancestor Nu snorted coldly. If I can survive the destruction of this era, I will make you pay for what you did today. Thinking of his begging Suyu, the other party did not appreciate it. Ancestor Nu was full of killing intent. However, a cold voice. Suddenly, at this moment, it fell into his ears. After running for so long, you only ran this far? Ancestor Nu was stiff and turned his head to look. A 9-colored human figure slowly followed behind. Eat my sword. As his voice fell, Suyu took out the 40,000-foot-long giant sword that was condensed by the power of the holy body. Ancestor Nu was shocked, and at the same time, he took out his own domain and blood charm. However, the 4 great monsters that were cultivated could not do anything to Suyu, let alone a little domain and blood charm. The 40,000-foot-long giant sword slashed down. Ancestor Nu roared unwillingly and slashed it into dust. After dealing with Ancestor Nu, Suyu turned back to the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat. After the attack of the Cauldron, Jinlong, and Jojo forces, the new vassal forces in the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat were easily suppressed. The leaders of the forces who entered first were escorted out one after another. Holy Body Su, you are the hope of the common people. You should protect the common people. Do you think you are worthy of your holy body by killing us like this? Yes. Without the support of the common people, where did you get the holy body? The holy body was the product of the gathering of the common people's will. However, this had nothing to do with them. I only protect and support my people, and you are not included in this list. Suyu waved his hand. Go back to where you came from. The King of Darkness and the others were excited. Immediately, all of them were banished to nothingness. Without the heavenly court, without the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat, how could they avoid the destruction of the era? Cauldron Master, the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat is intact. Please rearrange the people to enter, the King of Darkness said. Yu Xiangwan and the crowd laughed. If we rearrange them, wouldn't it be a waste of effort? Holy Body, Su. Oh, what did she mean? Suyu looked at the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat and said calmly, after returning to the heavenly court, inform the world that the traitors of Ancestor Nu have been wiped out, but the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat was destroyed in the battle and no longer exists. The Cauldron and many other forces were all buried in it. As he spoke, Suyu gave himself a slap, causing a trace of blood to flow from the corner of his mouth. In addition, I fought with Ancestor Nu and was seriously injured. The King of Darkness was confused. What was going on? Yu Xiangwan laughed. Don't you understand? Everything was Holy Body Su's plan. He explained the whole story. Chapter 2804. As it turned out, Suyu felt that the selection of the members of the Nightmare Crossing Lotus Seat was very tricky. On the other hand, Ancestor Nu and the others had ill intentions. So he beat them at their own game and sent the trouble-traversing Lotus Seat into their hands, shifting the blame. Finally, this scene played out. The King of Darkness came to a realization. No wonder Cauldron Zune is biased towards them. It's to give them a chance to take a mile after being given an inch. He looked ashamed and said, this subordinate is incompetent and has repeatedly misunderstood Cauldron Venerable. Please punish me. She recalled how she had misunderstood Suyu to be biased for no reason. She couldn't help but blame herself. After following Suyu for such a long time, did she still not understand his character? How dare he question his decision? Forget it. Just carry it out as soon as possible, Suyu said. The King of Darkness started to make arrangements. The Cauldron, the True Dragon, the 9 prefectures, as well as a small number of beings from the remnant domains, successfully entered the nightmare crossing Lotus Throne. When they returned to the heavenly court, they announced that this group of people and the evil crossing Lotus Throne had perished in the battle with Ancestor Slave. Because of this, even Sacred Suti was seriously injured. All of a sudden, the beings of the remnant realm were in an uproar. What? The evil crossing Lotus Throne has been destroyed. Those damn things. Why did they have to implicate us? Damn it. However, fortunately, Sage Su made a move and successfully exterminated them. Well, if it's destroyed, then so be it. We can't get a spot anyway. It's fine as long as we don't let those ingrates take advantage of us. Everyone nodded in agreement. In fact, they understood in their hearts. The majority of people did not have the chance to enter the evil traversing Lotus Seat. However, if Suyu really chose only a part of them and abandoned them, it would surely cause him to feel unbalanced. But now, the evil traversing Lotus Seat was destroyed and no one could enter. They were psychologically balanced, so it was easy for them to accept this fact. King of Darkness listened to the opinions of the living beings and sighed. It must be tough on Divine Physique Su. No wonder he had to go through so much trouble. If this matter was not handled properly, it might really lead to a rebellion. It might even shake the foundation of his sacred body. Once he incurred the disgust of all living beings and was betrayed by them, it was even possible for his divine body to be removed. It really wasn't easy. King of Darkness sighed. Just as the arrangements were completed, he suddenly received a report. A group of people gathered outside the heavenly court. He immediately rushed over. He realized that it was the group of exiles. They came back on a meteorite. Quickly leave heavenly court, King of Darkness scolded. However, they didn't care and started to destroy the heavenly court's defenses. His face was filled with ruthlessness and determination. If you don't let us live, then you all shouldn't think about having it easy either. At worst, we'll just perish together. One of the leaders of a power said gloomily, fiercely destroying Imperial Court's formation. The Dark King laughed. Do whatever you want. Even Gu Taishu was unable to break the formation, so how could they possibly destroy it? Even if they had 10 times the number of people, they still wouldn't be able to break it. He turned around and prepared to go back. However, he suddenly felt an extremely hot and scalding sensation coming from his back. Turning around, his face warped in horror. A golden beam of light brushed past the sky above the heavenly court. The beam of light was only the size of a thumb. From such a distance, it looked like a strand of golden hair. However, it was this strand of hair. It brought with it a temperature that was close to destruction. Wherever it passed, everything in the void was set ablaze. Meteors and miscellaneous items were instantly burned to ashes. The group of people who were destroying the heavenly court's formation didn't even notice before they were all set ablaze. In an instant, it was burned to ashes. As far as the eye could see, the entire void was filled with a sea of flames. The Dark King was shocked, staring at the disappearing golden beam of light, his lips trembling. The era's destruction light. The era's destruction light had begun. Moreover, it was 3 days earlier than expected. Swish! Suyu was also alarmed and immediately appeared in front of the formation. Staring at the shocking scene outside the formation, his heart slightly tightened. The era's destruction light had finally begun. The great destruction, which had been separated by an era, had finally begun. As far as the eye could see, everything, including the dust, was burned into nothingness. Not even dregs were left. The destruction of an era meant that everything in the world would be completely destroyed. Nothing would be left. Fortunately, he had set up the formation in advance. Otherwise, the heavenly court at this moment wouldn't just feel hot. It would be burned into nothingness on the spot, just like the outside world. Looking at the formation again, the words of the heavenly book inlaid on it were jumping gently at this moment. It was them that absorbed most of the high temperature. Many strong people rushed over one after another. At this moment, the raging fire had already dissipated. Nothing was left nearby. In the vast nothingness, it was empty and clean, leaving only a heavenly court hanging in the nothingness. A great sense of loneliness and fear struck the hearts of everyone. This was the era's destruction light. Is this the end? An expert swallowed his saliva and said, everything nearby had been burned, so it should have stopped. That beam of golden light was enough to destroy the world. The sinful lady held the sinful sword tightly with her 5 fingers. She, who had always been calm, was also nervous at this moment. She shook her head gently. The era's destruction light has not yet begun. How can it be over? What? Not yet begun? Even Suyu's heart was beating wildly. That beam of golden light just now was not the era's destruction light. It seemed to be responding to the sinful lady's words. A golden light spot slowly approached from right in front of them. It was not a light spot. It was a beam of golden light. It just happened to be facing them, so it gave the impression of a dot. It's a golden beam of light. Everyone was shocked. This golden beam of light was different from the others, and it was coming right at them. Just now, it had only brushed past the heavenly court, and it brought incomparable heat. If it hit the center, could the formation outside the heavenly court still resist it? Before the era's destruction light came, they were full of confidence in the formation arranged by Suyu. But now, they were all shaken. Even Suyu's expression was extremely solemn. He had no confidence at all. Whether the formation prepared for 30,000 years could withstand the era's destruction light was completely unpredictable. Look, there's another one. No, it's 2. Ah, there's more behind. In the crowd, there was a scream of horror. Everyone looked into the distance. Their pupils shrank as they discovered there were dozens of golden light spots coming towards this place. All of them were golden beams of light. Suyu's expression was solemn, and he shouted, "Turn the ship around and avoid the golden beam of light." The heavenly court was built as a warship, and the purpose was to be flexible and avoid the golden beam of light of the era's destruction light. The order was given. The heavenly court immediately sank. Whoosh! It sank tens of thousands of feet. A golden beam of light brushed past the top of the heavenly court. It also caused a strong fire. But because there was really nothing to burn, the flame flashed away. At the same time, the heavenly court, which was already hot, was boiling inside. The mountains, rivers, and lakes were constantly boiling, and huge bubbles emerged. All kinds of fish in the lake died instantly. A few people with cultivation were still struggling to resist. Ordinary mortal creatures, even if they hid in their houses, could not avoid it. Under the long-term heat, their houses began to burn. They were also in extreme pain. Suyu pointed in the air, and his body released the 7 yuan level domains. Chapter 28:05. In this way, the blazing heat in the heavenly court was finally blocked outside. The ordinary creatures managed to escape the calamity. They stared at the figure of Suyu in the sky and prayed in their hearts. They prayed that Suyu would defeat the destruction of the era. 1 or 2 people praying was nothing. However, if millions upon millions of living beings prayed, that would be faith. Suyu was staring at the golden light beam. He looked at his body as if he had a feeling. He faintly felt as if there was something extra in his body. He looked at it and saw the power of faith from the common people wrapped around his wrist, and it was constantly integrated into his body. Is this the faith of the common people that can improve the holy body? Suyu murmured. He turned on the oil lamp. He was surprised to find that the faith that had fused with his body caused the tattered oil lamp to shine with a strand of luster. Sure enough, Suyu murmured. What Lady Du Ming said in the letter was completely right. To achieve the upper realm, or even the perfect state of the holy body, he must have the faith of the common people. He was excited as if he had seen the road that needed to be taken in the future. However, the most important thing now was not the holy body, but the golden light beam. Although he dodged one, there were dozens of them behind. Under his command, the heavenly court's warship floated up, sank, and turned left and right. It tried its best to avoid a head-on collision with the golden light beam. This light beam was too terrifying. It must not be touched head-on. It was not easy to avoid dozens of golden light beams. But no one could be happy. No one even breathed a sigh of relief. Because after dozens of golden light beams, there were hundreds of golden light beams. They densely covered the distant sky. It illuminated the sky with a golden hue. Wherever it passed, the monstrous fire flashed. Retreat. Suyu looked solemn and decisively ordered. The heavenly court's warship immediately retreated frantically, trying to pull away. But the golden light beam swept through the endless void. How fast was it? How could it be avoided? The golden light beam arrived in front of the heavenly court's warship in an instant. There was no way to avoid it. Everyone was shocked to the extreme. Suyu forced himself to calm down, took a deep breath, and took over the control of the warship from the hands of the controller. He stared at the countless golden light beams and calmly controlled it. He dodged one golden light beam after another. That scene, from afar, it was like a butterfly dodging in a storm. In just a few breaths, dozens of golden beams of light brushed past him, causing a tremor. It could be said to be a perilous situation. The most dangerous one was just 100 feet away from the formation of the Heavenly Court's warship. Because they were too close, the horrifying aura caused the warship to sway unsteadily, nearly capsizing it. Suyu used all his strength to control the Heavenly Court's battleship to the limit. He dodged all the golden light beams that he could. However, there were too many golden beams of light. In the end, he still couldn't avoid everything. A golden beam of light brushed past the Heavenly Court's array formation. This was the first time the two of them made contact. The spell that Suyu had painstakingly set up had been torn apart by the golden light beam. The moment the formation cracked open, endless heat surged in. The sky of the Heavenly Court was instantly set ablaze. All the floating dust was destroyed. Those experts were also in great pain as they activated their powers to isolate themselves from the terrifying heat. Even so, there were still quite a number of casualties. A group of experts with insufficient strength were burned into nothingness on the spot. Upon seeing this, Suyu shouted, "Anyone who isn't a Pathmaster isn't allowed to reach the sky." Instantly, many of the experts who survived the disaster returned to the ground. Suyu looked at the sky, which had been burned to the ground, and his face was solemn. The golden light beam was much more terrifying than he had imagined. The only fortunate thing was that it just brushed past the formation and only tore a hole. Now, the hole had healed itself. The high temperature in the Heavenly Court returned to normal. However, if the golden light beam collided head-on, Suyu couldn't imagine what would happen. Judging from the situation just now, his formation might not be able to withstand it. It would be pierced by the golden light beam on the spot. Then, the golden light beam penetrated the entire Heavenly Court and burned everything inside. In other words, they didn't even have a chance to resist the golden light beam head-on. "I underestimated the destruction of the era," Suyu said in a low voice. He thought he had done his best and made sufficient preparations. But when the era was really destroyed, he realized his preparations were like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. It was meaningless. In front of the golden light beam, he was as small as dust, just like all the other creatures. This was the destruction of the era. The golden light beam was successfully avoided. For a long time, no light beam came again. The King of Darkness couldn't help but mutter, "It should be over, right?" But the sinful lady's hand holding the sword never relaxed for a moment. "It hasn't officially started. It's too early to end." There was a hint of heavy despair in her voice. The Heavenly Court might not be able to survive. What? Everyone was shocked again. The King of Darkness was shocked. It hasn't officially started? Then what was that just now? The sinful lady's face was heavy. It was a warm-up. Next, it will officially start. Boom, deep in the void. Suddenly, there was a rumbling sound. It was like countless thunder roaring. It was like thousands of sharp arrows flying at the same time, rubbing against each other and making a deafening sound. In everyone's eyes, a golden dark cloud gradually reflected. It was actually not a dark cloud. It was a golden light beam. Countless golden light beams gathered together so that it looked like a golden cloud. They crossed the void. Whether it was up or down, or left or right, they were all golden light beams. No matter where the Heavenly Court's battleship dodged, they couldn't avoid it, and their number was in the tens of millions. It was impossible to avoid it. Suyu's expression was extremely solemn. Everyone, be mentally prepared. As he spoke, he slapped on the formation with his palm, activating the Heavenly Book characters on it. Suddenly, the Heavenly Book characters all flew rapidly, drawing one track after another. This was the strongest state of the formation. If even it couldn't resist, then all living beings would say goodbye to this era. Swish, swish, swish. The golden light beam arrived in an instant. Suyu tried to adjust the Heavenly Court's battleship, trying to avoid the golden light beam. However, how could such a dense golden light beam be avoided? Finally, a golden light beam bombarded the side of the Heavenly Court's battleship. The terrifying power on the light beam instantly overturned the Heavenly Court's battleship, and it rolled in the void for several weeks. For a moment, the mountains in the Heavenly Court collapsed, the universe was turned upside down, and the sun and moon were in chaos. Countless creatures were injured and killed in the violent shock. However, this was just the beginning. The golden light beam hit the formation. It was blocked by the Heavenly Book characters. The violent friction between the two brought out a series of sparks, but it only lasted for a moment, and a Heavenly Book character was crushed. But it only lasted for a moment, and a Heavenly Book character was crushed. 1, 2. Hundreds of Heavenly Book characters were crushed one after another. Finally, a golden light beam was completely blocked. The light beam lost its power and gradually dimmed. Finally, it revealed its original appearance. It was a speck of dust. Chapter 28:06. This dust, it came from the sacred mountain, but it was just an ordinary speck of dust from the sacred mountain. Only after receiving a powerful force did it shoot into the distant void. Suyu's expression was grave, and he had a bad feeling about this. The golden beam was not the main force behind the destruction of the era. It was just a remnant of the destructive power. The true destruction had yet to come. However, not to mention the destructive power that had yet to arrive. Even the torrential golden light beams that had yet to end might not be able to escape. One must know that the destruction of 100 Heavenly Book characters, it merely blocked a speck of dust. There were still countless more to come. Boom, boom, boom. Because the Heavenly Court's battleship kept tumbling, it was impossible to control it effectively and dodge in time. As a result, he was instantly bombarded by hundreds of light beams. The Heavenly Book characters on the formation immediately spun rapidly, hurriedly resisting the golden beam of light. Fortunately, the words of the Heavenly Book were powerful. Hundreds of golden light beams were forcefully blocked. After a burst of sparks, the formation emitted bursts of green smoke. The golden light faded, leaving behind hundreds of specks of golden dust. The number of Heavenly Book characters on the formation had decreased by more than half. Thankfully, this wave of golden light finally ended. However, no one could relax because of the golden light at the end of the world. It didn't disappear because of the golden light beam's departure. Instead, it was getting stronger and stronger. The world was silent. There was no noise at all. However, the hearts of all living beings began to beat faster. The silence at this moment indicated that a storm was coming. The sinful girl gripped the sinful sword tightly. Because she was using so much strength, her knuckles were slightly white. She bit her red lips tightly, indicating the turmoil in her heart. He stared into the distance without blinking and said in a deep voice, "It's about to begin." Before this, it was just the aftermath. The true destruction of an era had just begun. The golden sky became brighter and brighter. It was even a little dazzling to the eyes. Heaven and earth were covered in gold. At the same time, a wave of fire whistled over, incinerating everything in the void. Bang! There seemed to be a cracking sound coming from the void. It was as if even the void could not withstand this terrifying golden light and was forcibly torn apart. Meanwhile, a golden speck of light was slowly descending from the horizon. It was no longer a golden beam of light. Instead, it was a sphere that was getting bigger and bigger. His entire body was burning with golden flames, like a sun. Within the sun, one could vaguely see the shadow of a majestic stone man. Stone-birth son of heaven. It was the stone-birth son of heaven personally controlling a portion of the sacred mountain to destroy the part of the world. As the other party approached, the golden sun grew larger and larger. From afar, it might only be a little. However, it was only at close range that he realized just how huge this part of the sacred mountain was. In total, it was several times larger than a complete 8-star civilization. Its entire body was burning with raging flames. Countless golden dust particles splashed out under the intense burning of the flames. It turned into a golden beam of light and swept in all directions. They had yet to reach the sacred mountain. Boundless golden beams of light were already sweeping over from all directions. The number was 10,000 times more than the last time. The people of the heavenly court all had pale faces and were filled with despair. It was really over. The heavenly court instantly fell into an impenetrable golden light beam. Tens of thousands of light beams bombarded the heavenly court's warships. The result was predictable. The remaining heavenly Tao characters vanished in the blink of an eye. The defensive array formation that had been around for so long had finally collapsed. Waves of terrifying golden light finally landed on the heavenly court's battleship. Inside the battleship, the 7 great origin realms that Suyu had set up shattered on the spot. The boundless heat instantly set the warship on fire. All of the living beings expressed their despair. It was completely over. However, at this moment, near the battleship, a track suddenly appeared, from slow to fast, spinning rapidly. It was unknown what the track was, but it was extremely powerful. It actually cut and annihilated all the golden light beams that shot over. And the track spun faster and faster, finally forming a protective film that enveloped the entire heavenly court's battleship. The storm-like golden light beams bombarded the protective film like a clay ox entering the sea. It was crushed into nothingness by the track. The golden dust particles were all completely shattered. Everyone was shocked. A few strong men exclaimed, This is the silk set up by the holy body of Su. Not bad. This was the silk obtained by Shao Dai. After it was set up, it had not made a move. Until now, when it was activated, it erupted with an unimaginably powerful force. How powerful were those golden light beams? It could be said that it could destroy heaven and earth. However, it was no match for the sharpness and toughness of the silk. As the holy mountain got closer and closer, the golden light beams became more and more concentrated. In the end, it almost became a wall. However, it was still shattered by the track. The hearts of the common people were reinvigorated. They stared nervously at the track, as if they had seen the only hope in a desperate situation. Only the sinful girl knew. That was far from enough. Because the real threat was not the golden light beams. It was the holy mountain that had already arrived. Rumble, the holy mountain finally approached. Heaven and earth rumbled. That was the pressure that the holy mountain, as the source of the great beginning realm, exerted on this world. No living creature, nothing could surpass the power of the holy mountain. It was still tens of thousands of miles away. The track stagnated for a moment. When it was within 1,000 miles, the distance of the track trembled and began to become chaotic. Pieces of starlight took the opportunity to pour in. When it was within 100 miles, there was a loud bang. The track finally collapsed. Several broken silk threads turned into flames and burned in the air. And the golden light poured in like seawater pouring into a sunken ship. The common people fell into despair again. This time, they would really die without a burial place, right? The era was about to be destroyed. No one could save them anymore. Everyone's hearts were dead, waiting for the end to come. Only one person rose up against the sky. That was Suyu. Anyone could retreat except for him, because he was the holy body of the common people. The oil lamp above his head suddenly appeared, releasing 9 colors. He pushed up with his hands. The power of the 9 colors turned into an illusionary giant that could support the sky and the earth. His hands held up to the sky, blocking all the collapsing golden waves. However, how could his second-rate holy physique withstand the golden waves? The giant's body was immediately annihilated by the waves, becoming extremely weak and about to collapse. Bang, bang. Su Yu's heart beat faster, forcing his holy body to reach the upper tier state. In this way, the giant's body was much more solid. In an instant, it resisted the collapsing golden waves. However, it only resisted for a moment. How could he resist a power that could destroy an era by himself? The giant's body trembled, tottering, falling into destruction. Even so, Su Yu still did not retreat. His eyes burst with boundless defiance. Who gave you the power to destroy an era? And who gave you the right to decide the survival of our common people? I will not die, nor will I perish, he growled. His heart beat again beyond the critical point. His silver-white hair quickly turned into burning black flames. His eyes were dark. Chapter 28:07. This was a sign of being demonized again. The illusionary giant also followed Su Yu's transformation. The whole body was dark, like the reincarnation of the Demon King. The blackened demonic body was extremely powerful. It actually managed to resist the golden wave. Moreover, it pushed it out. This shocking scene caused all living beings to be shocked and moved. Su Yu's holy body could escape on his own and ignore them. However, he still did not hesitate to bear the burden of the destruction of the era for the people. Before this, Su Yu was just a powerful existence in the eyes of the 8-star civilization creatures. There was no respect, but at this moment, who was not moved and who was not overwhelmed with emotions? Heaven and earth were destroyed. Who propped up the collapsing sky? The end was merciless. Whose heaven-defying intent was it to protect the common people? It was not the distant ancient gods, not the former holy ancestors. It was Su Yu. It was the holy body of the human race, Su Yu. It was the holy body of the common people, chosen by the will of the common people. At this moment, countless creatures had a deep respect for Su Yu. That respect turned into faith. It constantly poured into Su Yu's body, causing his oil lamp to transform rapidly. His demonic body was also constantly solidifying, and it gained infinite power, pushing the golden wave out of the heavenly court. At the same time, he turned to face the holy mountain. With his towering body, he stood in front of the heavenly court, resisting the golden wave and the descent of the holy mountain. In a holy mountain, the huge stone statue that stood silently spoke slowly. The voice was mighty, like the power of heaven, shaking every creature. The original intention of the destruction of the era was to destroy demons like you. The voice shook the void. The holy mountain released a dazzling golden light, instantly igniting Su Yu's demonic body. That light was the light of origin of the great beginning realm, destroying all things. Su Yu's demonic body could not resist it. However, these words aroused the rebellious will of the common people. The demons were sheltering them. The holy mountain was destroying them. In the end, who was the real demon? The disciples of the holy mountain are the demons. Su Yu's holy body is the God in our hearts. One person shouted. Countless living beings were infected. Yes, the holy mountain destroyed the world, and they still had the face to accuse the holy body of being a demon? If Su Yu was a demon, they would rather have more of such demons. Under the reverse will, more creatures chose to believe in Su Yu. An even more majestic faith was gathering in Su Yu's body like a mountain torrent. The oil lamp above his head transformed at an unprecedented speed. It used to be ancient and dilapidated. Now it was completely new, simple and unadorned, and somewhat new. Su Yu's holy physique had finally reached the first-rate holy physique. Even if he didn't deliberately stimulate his heart, he could still achieve great success. Moreover, at this moment, his beating heart was overloaded. His sacred body was so strong that it was close to a mature state. Get lost, Su Yu growled. His voice was like the rumbling of thunder. The golden flames on his body were completely extinguished. The sacred mountain, which was just a few feet away, was also shaken by the low roar. The stone-birthed son of heaven's expression was as indifferent as usual. A demon is a demon. On the surface, it's for the sake of the common people, but it still can't change its nature. Rumble, the sacred mountain, came crashing down. He swore to crush this first-rate divine physique that had appeared out of nowhere. However, it was too late. Su Yu's momentum had been set. He shook his arms and resisted the sacred mountain. How can a person who destroys the world be a demon? The stone-birthed son of heaven said indifferently, "Destroying the world is to purify the world. You don't understand, and you won't understand." As his voice fell, the sacred mountain was 10 times heavier, and Su Yu's body was shaken. He was faintly overwhelmed. This was the source of the great beginning realm. It was unimaginably heavy. Even the 9 great divine ancestors of the past had not seen them resist the sacred mountain with their flesh. Moreover, the sacred mountain was still increasing in weight, until Su Yu was completely crushed. In front of the sacred mountain, all forces were insignificant. Su Yu was weak, and it was impossible for him to resist. At this moment, a soft sigh came from the depths of the heavenly court. The sacred mountain has gone too far. He saw a colorful cocoon. The flickering colorful light suddenly stopped, and the inside turned into darkness. Then there was a cracking sound. The cocoon broke. A blurred figure of a woman flew out from it. She had no defense, but she was not afraid of the golden light beam. However, the light beam attack disappeared without a trace. Even when it approached the sacred mountain, the almost solid golden waves disappeared. They all disappeared when they encountered her. It was as if her body was a bottomless pit. Anything that got close to it would be devoured. She flew all the way to Su Yu's side. She looked up at the stone-birthed son of heaven in the sacred mountain and said majestically, "After cultivating for so many years, I can use your sacred mountain as an appetizer." But she stared at the sacred mountain. She opened her red lips and bit gently. Suddenly, the entire sacred mountain suddenly lost a large piece. The stone-birthed son of heaven's indifferent expression finally had a hint of seriousness. The 9-colored chaos butterfly actually has mutated remnants in this world. What a surprise. Boom! The missing piece of the sacred mountain immediately burst out with terrifying golden flames. Even Xiao Dai had to retreat. The golden flames were too powerful and had become a threat to her. Xiao Dai snorted coldly. "Since you know that I am the 9-colored chaos butterfly, you should know that I will still eat the sacred mountain." Behind her, 9-colored butterfly wings appeared. They were densely covered with patterns. However, if one were to look closely, one would discover that those patterns were actually formed by mouths. There were tens of thousands of them densely packed together, making one's scalp tingle. "Let's eat." Xiao Dai flapped her wings. Tens of thousands of mouths opened at the same time and bit fiercely. The stone-birthed son of heaven sensed something and shouted, "Beast, how dare you?" Rumble. What answered him was the collapse of the sacred mountain. The huge sacred mountain instantly lost a whole tenth. The stone-birthed son of heaven was furious. "Evil beast!" For some reason, the stone-birthed son of heaven had the strongest cultivation in the world. At this moment, he could only fly into a rage in the sacred mountain, but he could not leave the sacred mountain to attack. He could only watch as the sacred mountain was eaten by Xiao Dai. As a last resort, the stone-birthed son of heaven controlled the sacred mountain to stay away from Xiao Dai. "You want to leave?" Su Yu took a step forward, and the boundless giant shadow hugged the sacred mountain, making it unable to leave. Xiao Dai took the opportunity to gnaw. Crack! Another tenth of the sacred mountain was gnawed away. The stone-birthed son of heaven was already in a frenzy. "You asked for it," the stone-birthed son of heaven said in a low voice. The dazzling golden flames on the sacred mountain retracted, returning it to a gloomy and cold mountain. On the mountain, there were black vortexes everywhere. Su Yu did not understand. What was this? Xiao Dai had never seen it before and was stunned on the spot, because she found that those vortexes seemed to be able to devour things more than she could. At this moment, the sinful lady's solemn voice came from below. "Don't look at that mountain." However, it was too late. Su Yu and Xiao Dai had already noticed the body of the mountain. In that black vortex, suddenly, a swallowing force flashed. Chapter 28:08. When one soul left their body, their overall strength would be weakened by at least half. Moreover, The whirlpool on the mountain was clearly not as simple as washing souls out. After their souls left their bodies, not only did the devouring power not weaken, it became even stronger. The two of them were dragged uncontrollably towards the whirlpool of the sacred mountain. Moreover, they were being devoured by multiple vortexes at the same time, causing their souls to be devoured by various powers. They felt intense pain, as if their souls were about to split apart. Xiao Dai's soul conveyed a sense of fear. He immediately controlled his body from a distance and reacted, attempting to devour this part of the sacred mountain. However, his will was devoured by the vortex. It's useless. Everything in the world is born from the sacred mountain. Your soul is like that, and so is your will. The sacred mountain wants to take it back now. How are you going to resist? The stone-birthed son of heaven regained his aloof and indifferent expression. Xiao Dai's face sank. Ordinary beings couldn't go against the sacred mountain. However, right at that moment, Suyu suddenly said calmly, "Is that so? Let me try." He transmitted his will to his body through the air. The surprising thing was Xiao Dai had not been able to move her body, but Suyu had succeeded. At first, his body stopped moving. However, after his heart beat for a moment, he immediately came to life. He ran over and pulled Suyu's soul back into his body. His heart beat faster. The devouring power from the holy mountain had no effect on Suyu. The stone-birthed son of heaven was shocked. "Your heart is Mirrorflower's son of heavens?" If there was anyone in the absolute beginning who wasn't born from the sacred mountain, it was none other than the sacred mountain. Then it could only be the stone-birthed son of heaven. With this heart, Suyu was not afraid of the vortex devouring him. He regained control of his body. With a wave of his hand, Suyu captured Xiao Dai's soul and pressed it back into his body. Meanwhile, to prevent Xiao Dai's soul from being sucked out again, he held her in his arms. Xiao Dai blushed and glared at Suyu fiercely. "I will settle the score with you after I survive." After that, he immediately flapped the wings on his back and devoured the sacred mountain. The stone-birthed son of heaven frowned. How troublesome. The sacred mountain immediately flew away from the heavenly court. Suyu wanted to hunt them down, but he did not dare to stray too far from the heavenly court. No matter how one looked at it, the destruction of an era had yet to end. Because only a small part of the sacred mountain had appeared, the world regained its peace. They calmed down for the time being. Xiao Dai lifted her foot and stomped on Suyu's foot fiercely. Blushing, she said, "Aren't you going to let go?" Suyu let go of Xiao Dai and did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Can you be more reasonable?" If he didn't do that, Xiao Dai's soul would have already been taken away by the sacred mountain. Xiao Dai clenched her fist and said, "The truth is, you bullied me as always." It seemed that when she was still young, she was a little girl. Suyu had cheated her of the things that she had painstakingly stolen, leaving an indelible impression on her. At this moment, only then did Suyu have the leisure to look at Xiao Dai. The current little butterfly was more mature and natural than the little butterfly of her youth. There was a charm between her brows. He was no longer as cold and arrogant as before. What was especially special was that her pupils had turned into the shape of butterflies. They blinked like two butterflies fluttering in his eyes. It was very special. However, the pair of butterflies seemed to lack intelligence. Suyu pondered for a moment before asking, "Has it not evolved completely?" Just now, little butterfly broke out of the cocoon of her own accord. It was conceivable that she had given up halfway after discovering that Suyu was in danger. Xiao Dai turned her head away and did not look at Suyu. Her nostrils flared. "What do you think?" Suyu felt apologetic. Xiao Dai had prepared for hundreds of years for this evolution. In the end, it was all for naught at the last moment. "Is there a way to remedy it?" Suyu asked. Xiao Dai shook her head, her face slightly gloomy. "I don't know." The inherited memories that she had obtained were intermittent. Similar memories of how to remedy the interruption of the evolution had never appeared. At this moment, the sinful lady flew out. She happened to hear the conversation between the two. She stared at Xiao Dai meaningfully and said, "If you are willing to part with the emperor's heart, you may be able to remedy it." Suyu was solemn. The sinful lady, with her former status, had access to countless information. She must have had a basis for what she said. Are you willing to part with your heart? Suyu asked. The sinful lady said indifferently, Of course not. I only need a drop of blood from my heart. A drop of blood is enough? It was much simpler than he had imagined. The sinful lady nodded. Yes, a drop of blood is enough. Because she is a mutated, 9-colored chaos butterfly. The best tonic is chaos, and your heart is the heart of Mirror Flower Heaven's heart, one of the Stone Birth Emperors. Her heart is filled with the power of chaos. Legend had it that the Stone Birth Emperors came from chaos. It was not surprising that their hearts contained the power of chaos. So you could not help but think of the ancient god Jiuyu. After seeing the demonized Suyu release the destructive primordial thunder, she once said that Suyu was chaos. Was it also because of the heart? Or had he misunderstood something else? Junior brother, if possible, I hope you can also give me a drop of blood from your heart. The sinful lady pulled Suyu's thoughts back. Suyu was surprised. You? What did she want the blood from her heart for? The sinful lady said, I used to be the vessel of a part of Mirror Flower Heaven's body, and there is also the power of chaos in my body. If you can give me a drop of blood, I am confident that I can restore part of my peak strength. Suyu's eyes suddenly lit up. When the sinful lady was at her peak, she was known as the #1 person under the Emperor. But until now, whether she was an enemy of half of her body or on the same side now, he could not feel the power of the #1 person under the Emperors. Is your strength really as strong as the rumors say? Suyu voiced the doubts in his heart. The sinful lady looked out into the sky. After a long time, she nodded and shook her head. Yes and no. In the early years of the era, after I became famous, I challenged all the famous strongmen in the world. The 8 great masters of the era and several ancient gods were all defeated by me, including the ancient god Jiulong. It was me who threw him into the abyss of the Tao Abyss. Therefore, some people call me the #1 person under the Emperors. So he was shocked. It turned out that the disappearance of the ancient god Jiulong in the Tao Abyss was the doing of the sinful lady. However, she did not expect that the ancient god Jiulong had other opportunities in the abyss. Not only did he not die, but he transformed into an even more powerful existence. But that is only on the surface. There are some powerful existences in the Taichu that I have not encountered. Suyu's eyes flashed slightly. For example, the Nightmare Crossing Almighty from the 9-star civilization. The sinful lady's expression was solemn. Nightmare Crossing? So you knew about the Nightmare Crossing Lotus, but what was the Nightmare Crossing Almighty? The sinful lady said slowly, the 9-star civilization has never experienced the destruction of an era. It is the place where the people of chaos and the forces that have surrendered to chaos reside. You can imagine, how many eras have they experienced without the destruction of an era? As long as their lives were long enough, it was possible to travel across several eras. After cultivating for several epochs, how powerful are they? The answer was immeasurable.